Okay, this is episode 11 of Narrative Wake. Sponsored by EsportsPools, where you can play fantasy esports surrounding worlds and presumably bet on the games, if you indeed have such call. Right, Thorin, usual host. Kelsey Moser, usual co-host. Writes for a bunch of different websites. I noticed Travis did an interview where he thought, I don't even think he thought it was funny. He just actually forgot and just said she works for The Score, which is like, all right, Travis, and you should have just said, yeah, and you work for Yahoo. There you go. We're all just wrecking each other's careers. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so she does write for different websites, and we've got Veteran here, been on the show before. Again, we won't run through the whole Rolodex. Former analyst type guy for H2K, then coach of Schalke, and then, well, we'll see what happens next. No one knows where anyone's career is going. Could go up, could go down. Who can know, right? Well, I mean, here's the thing. We'll always be here, Kelsey. Don't worry about that. We can't be kicked off this show. But, again, what happens to other people, it's not my concern, quite frankly. I was going to say, not in my control, but it's not my concern. I don't really give a fuck. So, for now, very much alive and well. We'll start the episode. So, obviously, we've had the group stage of the Season 7 World Championship. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of unexpected things happen. So actually, I wanted to start in a very abstract sense at the beginning. Before we drill into the specifics of the games and the teams, I wanted to ask this. So pretty much every single, no exaggeration, practically every single Riot World Championship or MSI tournament I have ever seen in the history of League of Legends actually doesn't follow the script. You almost never get a scenario where all the favourites win all their games, all the teams expected to do, get out the group and go to X position in the bracket, go there. And so one of the reasons why I've always assumed that is, because by the way, there are in other games, like sometimes in StarCraft or CS, you'll sometimes get a tournament like that where, all the big favourites win and, generally things go how they should. But part of the reason I've always assumed it happens in League of Legends, and by the way, it happens as well in Dota, is because in these games, you have very dynamic metas, which are also patched quite frequently. And so not only do you have a scenario where, you're judging things off something that happened in the summer split where the patches were different, but then even more so than that, because it's a month later and it's like all the teams are specifically practicing for this one moment and specific opponents, you get like an inter-tournament meta that develops. And so it's quite famous, that what are the picks on week 1 sometimes aren't the picks on week 2. So Veteran, along those lines, has the meta for the Season 7 World Championship established itself now? Is it different from what people thought coming in any ways? Are there things that have stuck the same? What would you say to that?
I think Ardent, it would be the big change when it comes to meta. So a lot of teams that were primarily dependent on engaged supports and stuff like that are now having to make up for it in other roles.
Like in that InVen post where they listed the best players at each position, and for support they just put Ardent censored. They didn't list anyone because they were semi-memeing. Were they actually being ridiculous though, or do you actually legitimately just have to play that?
I mean, you do legitimately kind of have to play that right now because it's really easy to play compositions where you can control until a full-on late-game team fight, and in that scenario, the Ardent's team is going to win over the no Ardent's team. This also means that Gorilla and the rest of Longzhu as a byproduct are coming in with a really strong meta for them. So it's much better for them than it is for SKT, for example, that typically did play with a lot of engaged supports on Wolf.
I disagree with that comment.
Sure. Well,
I think actually Ardent heavily favors SKT. That was my entire point going into the tournament, was that I think that Wolf looks really weird on things that basically aren't Alistar. I think he did well on the Rakan, but traditionally you think of Wolf as someone who roams even more often on the Janna. When SKT were getting criticized and they went on this huge long losing spree, he was basically doing nothing but spamming Lulu and getting ground pounded by Alistars. So and then he would lose the 2v2 because SKT were having trouble transitioning to a setting where they could have a dominant and aggressive 2v2 lane, because they almost never play an aggressive and a dominant 2v2 lane. And I think Wolf is traditionally better with disengage and mid supports that just push out lane necessarily. So
I mean, he was always the type to bring out the Namis and the Zyras though, versus those types of champs like Janna, Lulu, etc. And that just isn't an option anymore.
a ton of Jana Lulu and played like the Zyras and the Namis, and those those aren't necessarily you can't necessarily play Zyra and Nami, but you can play like the Jana and Lulu, which are still things. But if it reverted
to that type of meta, I then favor Wolf over Gorilla. But in this
but those still
meta,
aren't
it's definitely Gorilla favored.
I think this is a way better meta for Wolf than like the Alistar or not Alistar, like than the Thresh Blitzcrank type meta that was like before the Ardent meta.
I mean, in that type of meta, he would legit just bash out picks like Zyra and stuff like that, whereas Gorilla would legit be at fault. Like, Gorilla on engaged champs was never a good thing, even back in like the coup type.
I mean, I'm not comparing Wolf to Gorilla. It's like the difference here is I'm not comparing Prey to Gorilla. I think the meta is way better for Wolf now than the previous engage meta. I think the previous engage meta was a big part of why SKT were in decline, and that now they're like much better off where Bang can just scale and like play team fights well, because this was not a bot lane that generated pressure, and they were in a situation where they had to rely on bot lane to generate pressure.
Okay, I'll agree with you there. I do still think that this meta is really strong for Gorilla, and it brings him up on a definite level above like Wolf.
Well, I mean, one of the most famous Janna players of all time, right?
Yeah, he
and
is.
Lulu as well. Obviously, they had the juggernaut.
I mean,
if
we're debating whether or not
ever to play the game.
If we're debating whether or not Gorilla is better than Wolf, like I'm never going to contest you on that. Like regardless of meta.
To bring it back to like Thorin's question, I think that a bigger reason why like all of these tournaments don't necessarily follow the script is that the script is typically defined by a best of 5 knockout tournament, and all of these world championships and the MSI are initially defined by a best of 1 double round robin. So we're essentially sending seedings determined by how strong you are in a best of 5 setting, which a lot of other things like adaptability, like mental stamina come into play, and translating that into a best of 1 setting and expecting it to be accurate. And that's never going to be accurate. And I think that's going to be a bigger point than like just a straight up meta change every time. Though meta changes do happen, but we haven't had one anywhere near as big as it normally around was. Normally you'll have like suddenly Sheen is buffed, suddenly Orianna is the only thing and is completely uncountable, or suddenly you have that fucking Gangplank time in season 5 that we try to forget and more.
Okay. So actually, in terms of the format part you brought up there, we'll put a pin in that because actually we can talk about that as well. But along those lines of the meta aspects, again, as usual, if anything becomes really strong, fans do just complain if you don't play it. So when you're saying it's as strong as this, right? Do you have to play Lulu and Janna essentially if you're a support here? Like, if you notice, I mean, we'll get into this later, but in the TSM debate, I mean, Biofrost basically never went to Janna, right? I mean, he just plays like Rakan or something. So, do you have to play these champs? Like, do you think you can get away with not doing so if you want to win your groups and go far in the tournament?
I think
you have to bet.
I was just gonna say, I think Rakan is like ridiculously OP because you can still it's still a super strong shield support. You can still build Ardent on it, and Rakan still has like a really strong, insanely broken engage tool. So Rakan just does everything, and Rakan generally is banned a lot as well. So
yeah, I actually think Rakan and Lulu are better than Janna overall. I think both give you far more options to actually engage and dictate the fight later on that you will need to take if you are playing these full control late game scalers. Like the SKT EDG first game, where they had Rakan, and Rakan was the tool that they used in tandem with their much better vision priority than EDG had to actually break open the game in their favor. Compare that to the second SKT EDG game where they had Janna Twitch. It was Twitch, right? And it's much harder for them to then dictate the fight on their terms with that type of setup. Like if it's like a Janna Tristana, it's going to be much easier than if it's like Janna Twitch. But outside of Tristana, most of these hyper carries are really low mobility. So then a Lulu is going to be much better. And the Lulu is also going to bully Janna in lane and allow you to establish control over the lane that you're going to be wanting to play around for most of the game as well. So I actually think those two are much better than Janna. I think that's probably one of the better decisions TSM made, was going for these types of supports over the Janna. I also think Taric is like a really nice bridge for teams like Misfits who've bashed it out, who were really led by like their support. So Ignar was very famous with like his blitz or his flash, like with his Bard as well, back when no one else was really doing it. Because they were so heavily reliant on them, they transitioned into picks like Taric that can still do Ardents, but can still act as engage. Go on.
I was just going to say the flip side, obviously, of the Lulu is the reason why like people talk about the Lulu-Janna dichotomy, and the reason why Janna, I would say, was a much more dominant choice in week one is because people weren't necessarily like playing the more lane dominant comps to sort of erase the Janna. Because if you don't race the Janna and you get to the point where like Janna has full Ardents, you have multiple items on your AD carry, then Janna is just like super good for team fight AD carries and like just will win you any fight at a certain point in the game. So with the disengage, with the shield, with everything else. So I think that it's just like, and the heal, obviously. So.
Sure, I think if you have the type of vision control that SKT are able to do, though, you're going to have more use off of the engage of a Rakan later on than you are just off a straight-off damage buff that the Janna shield gives you. Like, it's going to be much.
I think if you get Rakan, obviously, like, that's not even, to me, that's not even a question. But I think if, like, usually the games come down to Lulu versus Janna. So,
yeah.
Okay. Because when we have these discussions about how the different teams did, I feel like that's one area that, listen, if you actually ask people who are experts, you'll get to these points eventually. But because fans always start at such a simplistic aspect of like, did the player play badly? You know, could he have done something at this point in the game? I actually feel like when you talk about Worlds, because it always does have this like inter-tournament meta, and actually as the tournament goes on, you get like a pick that emerges that is strong, that then people all go to, you know, which sometimes then means you drop off another one. I think it's useful when you talk about the teams, especially the ones that go out, if you can frame it in this context. Like, could they play certain picks that you had to play in the tournament? Were they, like, for example, was there a really good player that just never played something in the mid lane, something along those lines? So as we go into it, if possible, try to frame some of these discussions around these things, because I don't claim to know enough about any of these aspects to be able to bring up the actual specifics. So let's start here, okay? It's the beginning of the episode, veteran. Everyone knows it's coming, so I won't tease everyone with it, but it's Thorin's Christmas, okay? You know, Americans, they have Thanksgiving, we give thanks for that. You know, you have Christmas where you celebrate your family. Every year what happens is TSM goes out of Worlds way earlier than expected, and I celebrate, I give myself gifts of hundreds of dollars thanks to videos. I tweet and enrage people who don't matter, who literally don't matter on any level as humans. And the people who do matter understand it's jokes, and they say, haha, those are jokes. And sometimes I even sing classic Louis Armstrong songs on the streets of Amsterdam while slowly spinning it. Did you notice that? Listen, my levels got really good, actually. I used to be terrible at all technical things, but did you notice as I sung that song, as I got to kind of the climax of the song, I swung the camera towards the sun, so it did like a J.J. Abrams lens flare over my shoulder. That's art, veteran. I just came up with that on the fly, mate. You know, like, I didn't have multiple takes of that. I was loving life. When you're in the mood, when you're just enjoying your life, these things happen. I was walking in a wonderland in that moment, you know. So let's start here, right? Veteran. Everyone who came on the show for the Worlds episode, literally everyone, I know there might have been one, I think it was only Gilius said that TSM wouldn't get out. Everyone else, by the way, most people had TSM first place. That's no exaggeration. Almost everyone had TSM first place.
I had them first on my pick'em.
Yeah, almost everyone did. No, listen, I don't blame anyone. I'm a
Euphoria guy, and I had TSM first on my pick'em. But my new rule is that you can only overrate North America. That's my new rule for every tournament.
That's not a bad one. But here's the thing, though. Just to give people the quick context before everyone forgets. TSM did get a group where, even though they're not actually the number one seed in the group, they got basically the dream group that you could get if you were a Pool 2 team. Because the number one seed was the team that actually everyone thinks is the weakest of all the number one seeds, which is the Flash Wolves, who come into a tournament with a terrible top laner, so their best support player can't play in theory or isn't suited to playing a lot of the meta champions. You know, they come in not a great situation. Then you had Misfits who, you know, most people looked at Misfits' success in the LCS as like, yeah, okay, they figured some things out, but a lot of it was also Fnatic shit in the bed. You know, not a lot of people gave Misfits that much of the credit on that side of the equation. And then finally you have WE, who only made it in through the gauntlet scenario anyway. They were touch and go to make it, just as they've been touch and go, and they didn't make it in past years. You know, no one actually had, like, that's the thing, no matter how much you wanted to hate on TSM, there wasn't really any logical reason to say that they wouldn't get out of this group. So let's start there. Like, Kelsey, what would be the biggest broad strokes? Why didn't TSM get out of this group? Where do you start?
There were a couple of things. I think the biggest thing that you go to is that this ended up being a group that was dictated much more by junglers than a lot of the groups, because Svenskeren ended up in a group with
how did we not
some
see
junglers who are the best junglers in their regions, you know?
Okay, but here's my question then. So that is actually one thing that we did identify on the pre-World show, that the one area where there was an obvious disadvantage for TSM was, in theory, everyone in the group had a good jungler except them. So how did all the experts not see this coming? I'm not saying that to rag on them. I legitimately wonder what the factor that distracted them was, you know?
So for me, what it came down to was how jungle and support would adapt to the meta, and I kind of discounted Misfits and Flash Wolves. I discounted Flash Wolves on 2 counts. One being that I felt like it's difficult for Karsa to adapt to a jungle meta that's like primarily tank focused, and it's difficult for Sword Art to adapt to a meta that's like really Ardent based. Both of these accounts ended up being like fairly right. I think Karsa did pretty well, like overall, given the situation that he had, but just like Flash Wolves in general had a lot of problems, and like Sword Art was not able to get them the engages that they wanted. They didn't really seem like, there were gaps where they didn't seem to understand waves, like a bunch of other stuff that ended up not being jungle related. Misfits, I think you did see situations where they still had issues with support. Like for me, I thought the jungle was still going to be a factor for Misfits, because I have always like rated Maxler pretty highly. And I thought that Misfits had finally figured out how to play around him, but the support thing for me was still a big deal, because every time we saw Misfits play like non-engaged supports in the LCS, they just like didn't seem to understand how to set up fights, how to set up basically anything. And you even saw on the last day, they were trying all sorts of shit, like the Thresh and the Blitzcrank, and then in the final game, they first picked Taric, of like all things to have to first pick, basically because they are reliant on like this engaged support situation. But it ended up like working well enough for them that they ended up in a tiebreaker situation with TSM and won it. So,
okay. So wait a minute. Let's just roll it back again then. So we started there with the first broad stroke you gave me was the jungle aspect.
Yep.
Right, veteran. I have noticed that in all other areas you could blame TSM. Because by the way, when you have the sort of breakdown they did, where you lose to everyone in the group and you lose all the key games, it's very rarely going to be either one player or one factor. That's like quite unlikely. You know, I'd say that's fine if it was like just one key game and everyone in the group played great. But one area that I don't hear anyone defending the position for TSM is the jungle. It does seem like everyone's throwing Svenskeren out to dry, and is that fair?
Yes. I mean, there were multiple instances in the games where he seemed unaware of how the game was progressing for his lanes, and he was literally just spent the rest of the time going for the most efficient path possible, rather than going for the path that would ensure that TSM gets their mid to late game objectives and that the enemy isn't actually able to counter it. So Misfits, everybody targets TSM's bot lane. Svenskeren seems to be completely and utterly blind to that, and blind to the proper responses you should be taking at the proper times to that, and will outright just trade sides of the map favorably for the enemy team. So I do think it's like perfectly justified. I'm not entirely sure that...
I believe most people suggested that all Svenskeren did is either not gank and just farm, or sometimes he ganked top lane. That was like the implication most people get. Is that too extreme?
He does early ganks top, but I do think that he heavily contests the vision around the bottom side of the map, but he just doesn't necessarily seem to do it based upon when it is the most appropriate to do it in the game. Like TSM seem to have a really formulaic way to play the game. All right, they'll set up Haunter to play the game strongly himself, and then Svenskeren will just try to ensure that bot lane has enough control around Drake that they are actually able to play forward, and then Sven will just farm if he's not doing one of these two things. All right, and then Bjergsen is essentially left to get solo pressure with the de facto vision that he's gotten because Svenskeren's contesting bot vision control so much. But Svenskeren will contest bot vision control so much even if, for example, Gnar topside is really needing a deep push in his lane. Or he'll go and farm Wraiths if Double Lift is on like 200 HP and being zone ad infinitum, and waves are being sacked against him and he's really obviously about to be dove. Like he does these things formulaically, but he doesn't do these things with like a purpose in the context of the game. You know, it seems like TSM just going with the same game plan every time, and on the international stage, people are going to be able to figure out we just have to do this every time. Like everybody now knows about everyone knows. It was an open secret in season 2 that what TSM did was play around blue buffs perpetually. That is literally the only timer that Svenskeren genuinely seems to go around. Right? Everybody knew that even since season 2. There is, you can find a stream. Scarer on his stream once talked about why TSM was so dominant. He was like, first they troll scrims, and second, before every game, they are literally like, all right, 7 minutes, go to enemy blue buff. And even I think Svenskeren in an interview with you recently said that one of the big things he learned about TSM in TSM was the importance of playing around buffs. Which is something the Chinese also do. Chinese have evolved it.
He said that it's something that Reginald in particular instilled in the team. He started out saying it was the coach, and then he said or Reginald, ended up enforcing this idea of playing around blue buff. And a lot of the
But my point is it's a static team that everyone has figured out. Okay. And these guys are just playing to said formula. These are not guys that have been taught how to adapt to an opposing team's strategy and adapt theirs for it, or adapt to a completely changing situation in the game. They just haven't been tested by that too much in North America. And the reason that I put TSM first, just because I want to defend myself a little bit here, the reason I put TSM first was that I thought that they were in a group with people, specifically misfits, who don't understand side wave control in the mid to late game, but TSM do. TSM and G2 are the only teams in the West that do. And I thought that they would get to that point fine anyway, because misfits were still getting used to playing around Power of Evil, and if they were drawing so much pressure in Power of Evil's lane to do that, which is not something TSM have ever done, then Svenskeren would Ferretti be free to contest Vision bot pretty much uncontested. But obviously this didn't transpire. People were much smarter about how they approach TSM, but the rulebook of how to play against TSM has been written for years.
Okay. Well, here's the question then. When you were saying the part before the part about the blue buff, they just play this certain way at the beginning, that actually doesn't sound as negative initially as it may seem, because that actually sounds like that's coaching. Like the guy's telling them, this is how we're going to set up the game, this is how we're all going to play early on. The problem is, that if that doesn't work, in theory, you would hope your shot calling will adapt to what is going on. And is that not part of the issue? Everyone always, I realize, again, some of this is just people who are TSM fans. And for anyone who doesn't know, if you know anything about how Reddit works, it does popularize the opinions that are the consensus, and the ones that aren't get destroyed. So when a TSM dominates, their fans actually can skew the narrative. So people always talk when it's in an ALCS about TSM has good macro and their shot calling is good. But in all these world situations, I realize people try to zone in on a player played bad, but it does seem like the shot calling is always terrible in these games they lose.
I think for TSM, they have what he's saying it to an extent is that TSM almost have a hierarchy of objectives or plays that they go for. Sure. And part of it is that they can't not contest the dragon, or they can't not go for the way that Svenskeren phrased it when I interviewed him, because I asked him specifically about this because I've done a lot of work talking about TSM blue buff priority and stuff like this. So I was curious, and I finally had the golden opportunity to interview TSM, because they basically deny any interviews with anyone indiscriminately. So I had the opportunity to interview the jungler and ask him about it, and he basically phrased it if we have any sort of pressure at all, we know to go for the blue buff.
Yeah.
So the enemy blue buff effectively. So this in my head just means that they have a set of rules. It's if this then that, and then they almost always it's a very stagnant set of rules. I've seen the reason why I think everyone talks about how good Bjergsen's Rise or his Talia is, and part of the reason why it's so effective and he makes so many hero plays with this champion is because TSM will be rotating and setting up for Drake, and then they'll leave Baron completely open. And then so Bjergsen has to ult over to the Baron to stop the enemy team doing Baron, because they're prioritizing Dragon at the wrong time. They're just, I don't really understand why they have this set up, but they get away with it because as the game progresses, the enemy teams will just push, and I've ranted about this on the show as well. They'll just
push the waves in without
slow push waves, yeah. And so TSM don't have to extend, and you saw in the Misfits game, Misfits were actually controlling the waves properly, And so Double Lift and Haunter had to extend out like into the side lanes to get experience, or they get denied and starved and wouldn't be able to come back into the game, and then they got picked off. So like, to me, this is a big it's a very strange way that they're setting this up. I actually think, I don't know, I would really like to learn more about like TSM's coaching hierarchy, and not in terms of like the structure, but in the way that like they present ideas, because it seems to be very like you have only a fixed set of scenarios, and the fixed set of scenarios is limited, you know?
Listen, I mean, I realize I never thought I'd be saying this sentence, but don't worry, Kelsey, you've got a man on the inside. So all I'm going to tell you is I will have this information for you at some point in the near future. Exactly. That's the world we live in, veteran. I think actually we all just died in a plane crash before the last US election, because how can that be reality? How can I be the one with the inside link to TSM, veteran? I've got players, I've got people inside. Listen, I can do it. I can get it done. Okay, guys. So here's the question, though, veteran. What I meant by that was, I realized you did like the classic thing where you just got so triggered by the first half of the sentence. When I say that's coaching, veteran, what I mean by that is, if you have a bunch of kindergarten kids, you don't tell them, right, here's the principle behind why you would make good decisions, and you can all choose what to do. What you tell them is, it's 6 o'clock. It's all, well, that's the wrong time. It's 10 a.m. time for the story, kids, come and gather up. You know, you have to just lead them, right? So when I say that's coaching, that sounds to me like you have a bunch of players, none of whom have ever been the primary shot caller, who don't really understand like in-depth macro concepts, but they're good individual laners, they're good skilled players, and you're just trying to put together some sort of a basic, follow this sort of recipe list, and you might be able to win the game. That's why I say it's coaching.
Okay, yeah, but my point was that this recipe has been an unchanging recipe throughout several metas.
So what should they have switched up, do you think? What would be like a simple switch without having to literally make them all geniuses? How could they have adapted, do you think, in some of these matches? Okay,
for example, you should have the laners dictate what some scavengers should be doing more. So it should literally be, it could literally have been as simple as in the Misfits game. Literally, okay, if we don't shove this wave out, they can dive us. And then Svenskaren will know that he has to path towards bot regardless. It has nothing to do with knowing whether Maxwell is going bot or not. It has literally nothing to do with that. You just know that the wave is in a position where you need jungler assistance to push it out, because if you approach it, you are fucked. If they are able to stack, you are going to get dove, etc. Like it, you just literally, that one line is enough. And this immediately is not what I'm seeing from them. And then the reason that I was initially getting triggered by what you said is that you shouldn't be coaching like a consistent play style for your team for every single game. Like Korean teams don't do that. Like we got like completely blindsided by Samsung at Worlds last year when they basically did like the exact same set. Should I keep going?
Yeah, just keep going, mate. Don't worry.
They basically did the exact same set of wards topside in all the Cloud9 and their group stage games, and then transitioned all control towards bot. They completely changed that when they played against us. Like literally, they just completely changed that, and we were completely blindsided by it. But they did that because we just don't play the same type of style that the teams that they were playing against in the games that we were watching were. And it's very rare to see Korean teams like that just played like a completely consistent style. Like you'll have SKT going for like the control scaling comps a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll do the same set of moves all of the time. And it is literally as specific as TSM do the same set of moves every fucking game. Like stuff does change.
And is that very distinct though from other Western teams?
That's distinct from a lot of Western teams, yeah. Like you should know, for example, that there are going to be certain mid lane situations where if you can prevent an opponent getting a really good back at a certain point, you're also in effect enabling your mid laner to get a really good back, and you're going to be at an incredible advantage if you're able to secure this back. I don't see TSM do any of that. Bjergsen has to do all of this shit himself.
Okay,
like they're small. That sounds small. That's actually huge.
So then, a very naive
should
question.
Come part and parcel with coaching.
Obviously, people are going to say, well, then why don't people just beat them in NA? But is it the fact that they have Bjergsen and Double Lift, Todser, you know, they have players who in theory are some of the best at their roles? Does that somehow bridge the gap when you're in NA?
NA as a whole is very formulaic. And the reason why the reason why I was rating like even Immortals over Fnatic, for example, is that Fnatic themselves also very formulaic. They just have a worse formula. At least most of NA understood that mid priority is a gigantic deal, and Fnatic like still struggling with this concept. So I figured that because NA had these fundamentals down and they were playing formulaically, but they were at least playing to like a much more correct version of the formula than the EU teams were, that they would have the advantage and that they would be pulling out. The reason that TSM were able to do it, are able to win the split every single time is, yes, they have Bjergsen. So when it comes to mid priority, it's a much more foregone conclusion for them. And they've always played around this. Even if they haven't done anything like spectacular with it, they're a completely and utterly predictable team, but it's still going to be very hard for a lot of North American teams to counter it. And quite frankly, I don't think that a lot of North American teams come into a game versus TSM thinking we need to counter TSM's game plan that they've been doing for years straight. It just seems like an afterthought for them.
It was really funny in the spring final because I was tracking some of the ways in which TSM like set up their early game. I went for blue buff, and then there was like this one blue buff, the first blue buff in one of the games, TSM versus C9. I think it went like 13 minutes without anyone taking it. It was a TSM blue buff. TSM had taken C9's blue buff like twice, and nothing happened to this blue buff, or maybe it was FlyQuest, but nothing happened to this blue buff until like 13 minutes enemy team took it. And I was like just really shocked that this happened, because like I don't know if people are just not paying attention to what's going on, but a lot of these like sorts of plays are just not considered or not taken account of because it's not like falling into the game plan of these North American teams. And I feel like this is also true of European teams to a lot of an extent. Like you said, it's like we should highlight the fact that like we're criticizing TSM a lot and we're criticizing like the North American region a lot, but like these games between these seeds between NA and EU both came down to a tiebreaker. Like so I think that needs to be highlighted. And then in the first week, like the North American team was in Group B at least, was much more dominant. So
actually thinking about just thinking about what you were saying, because you actually brought up Doublelift. Actually thinking about it a bit more, both of the other NA Worlds teams here, Immortals and Cloud9, have gaping problems with their bot lane as well, actually. Whereas TSM, especially on blue side, like there's a huge meme that they are like a blue side team in it. And if you're going to play around blue buff, you're playing to the strong side of the map by default if you're playing to bot lane anyway.
What gaping holes does Cloud9 have in their bot lane?
Cloud9 are very poor. Okay, so their bot lane is very poor at knowing when they can and can't be aggressive relative to where their jungler is. So if you're able to take the amount of vision control that TSM prioritize on the bot side of the map, that's a very abusable point. So when I was making my point about Samsung earlier, that is actually the type of thing that straight up counters Cloud9. They simply don't seem to have communication there. When Rush was there, you could understand a bit more why, but now it's a bit less clear why. But that the communication just doesn't seem to be there.
So when you are the star player of a team, you do get the criticism for when you lose, whether fairly or unfairly, because it's actually a direct counterbalance to the fact that when you win, you get the credit, whether fairly or unfairly. You know, you can sometimes win as the star player and not have a great series, but everyone will be like, you're the MVP, you're the champion, you're the best, you know, you're the best of all time at your role. So obviously, most people on Reddit blame Doublelift and Bjergsen for these losses. Now, your old mate, and mine, LS, has a theory that he actually thinks Hauntzer fucked up a lot of the early game stuff that then led later on to it being tougher for Bjergsen, tougher for Doublelift, and making them kind of be in a bad situation, which they then maybe made mistakes from. Where do you fall on this issue? How did the stars of TSM do?
What specifically early game does he think?
I'm not LS, first of all. I don't think about the game LS does, but it was along the lines of like Hauntzer didn't always like use the waves properly. Sometimes he just rotated down at the wrong time or something.
I will agree when it comes to mid to late. Okay, Kelsey.
There were teleports that I think Hauntzer did.
I think he listed a teleport as well. Yes.
Yeah, awkward was like one of the issues that LS had.
Because then those would be instances where jungler's holding wave for top and he doesn't have to necessarily burn his teleport is the only thing I can assume, unless he's talking about like a cross.
Yeah, but even then there would be instances where he would lose maybe like 3 CS or no CS if you walk back to lane. But I agree that there were instances where it was like, I think there was one game where Svenskeren could have held the wave for him, but I still think it. Yeah, I mean, there was one where you could tell what they were thinking on the TP.
Okay, sure, but I think that Haunter's like big issues are when it comes to mid to late game, and what he should be doing with his wave on bot lane as his team is going for like objective control around Baron. So the big issue that Haunter has, I remember this now. The big issue that Haunter has is that he is completely and utterly tunnel focused on making his lane as safe as possible. And I think, was it against Flash Wolves where they were contesting Rift Herald a lot? I think it was Flash Wolves, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then in that game specifically, he's literally, as TSM are going to contest Vision around Herald, he's literally just leaving his lane with Cho'Gath in it to go and ward for himself. All right. If you do that, Cho'Gath has the freest teleport in the world. All right. He doesn't do this to go join his team. He does this to just go ward. Now TSM are in a 4v5 situation around Herald. Like, it's a really free engage for Flash Wolves. But Haunter just completely and utterly ignores that at this point he should be maintaining pressure bot to pin Cho'Gath in. He can completely do that. It's Snar versus Cho'Gath. But he opts not to because all he's thinking about is the safety of his lane. And that is like a running thread throughout Haunter's mid to late game that was being abused by a lot of these teams. Like, there were a lot of instances where he was safe to just catch waves, or where he had to be pressuring. And this is something that TSM actually get more correct than a lot of Western teams. This is something that they get a lot more correct, but they're not on the level of someone like G2 when it comes to. I think G2 do that actually very well.
I think the other aspect when you talk about Svenskeren and Haunter is that I think that there's weird, like, because TSM at this tournament are trying to play to an extent around bot, but they don't know how. If they're playing against Shen, they don't necessarily know how to get to a situation where, like, okay, I think a lot of teams just think logically, oh, we're playing against Shen, we should lane swap here with like pressure from topside. Instead, they'll say, oh, we have pressure topside, we should blow Shen ult in like a bot skirmish or something and force like the Shen to lose waves and Haunter to get pressure. Like, they did this kind of play twice at least in week 1. And what happened was, like, there was one where it worked out really well and Haunter got a huge lead when he was pressuring the turret against WE, and they got like the turret off that. W ended up trying to transition pressure top, and because of how much pressure Haunter was exerting off of that play. And then they ended up getting Dragon off of that. Like, they didn't want to give up Dragons for these plays. Like, basically what was happening is they didn't want to transition their bot lane top because then they'd lose Dragon. Sure. And TSM are obsessed with Dragons. But the thing that happened was, like, they tried type of play again when Haunter was like walking back to lane. He was still trying to bait out this teleport. So there was no like way for them to make a good trade top or for Haunter to make a good trade top. Svenskeren just made this play and they lost the game. I think this was the Misfits game, yeah. So
see, this is again weird. Like one-line things that change the entire game. Like, this is really basic communicative stuff. Like, TSM should, okay, so Haunter should know that he can't leave his lane to ward if he is needed to maintain pressure bot when TSM are going for vision control. Like, it's a simple one line. Like, if he's going to go and leave his lane, there's no pressure in the bot lane, TSM can't go for Baron control. So just decide which play you're going to make right here. Which one is the most necessary one. This is literally a one-line thing. Like, I don't understand how this type of thing's not being done.
Okay. Another question I had actually was, I remember in this tournament that there was like a whole bunch of times, like I think at least twice, where Haunter played Renekton, I believe. And actually in this tournament, I think Renekton was only picked something like 4 times in the entire tournament thus far, including play-ins. Is that a fine pick to do at the moment, do you think? Is that okay for this meta?
Did it against Shen once, didn't he?
I think he did it against Alphari, Shen, and he did it against, let me have a double check on the other one. I think the other one was against Misfits, maybe the second time? No.
I think that may have been Jace you're thinking of? Jace against Misfits?
Jason and
tiebreaker?
Oh, he did it once then, right?
I mean, Jason Renekton were both decent picks actually against both those situations because I think having those types of early pressure solo lanes and the late game scaling bot lane is like the optimal way to play the game right now. With those two acting as the bridge, and if you're versus a Shen, taking a pick like a Renekton is really, really good if you want to get your bot lane safely through the game. Like that, he's going to pin the Shen in non-stop. Like, and then TSM can go for their weird like bait that Kelsey's saying that they do. Pretty safely if he's doing Renekton, so long as they're not doing it off of a retarded back or something.
Okay, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say that the problem is with those games was they just didn't play to topside very well in those games either.
Yeah.
Well,
so
for example,
that breaks the formula, no? That breaks the formula.
Yeah.
Here's a question then. So in the game where they did pick Jace, why were there just never any top ganks early on? Isn't that the whole premise for why you would want that champion in that moment?
Yeah, I'm remembering this setup. Like I definitely think that they should have played more to topside in that game, but it wasn't necessarily bad that they didn't because it's not like the Jace died or anything. Like they still could have played off of that. It's just when they tried to transition to like 1-4 and play off of the Jace and the bot lane, Jace got picked off a lot because they didn't have it set up like the rest of the map set up to do this 1-4 setup. And then like Kog'Maw could have scaled fine. I think it was a Kog'Maw comp. And they would have been fine off of that, I think. But the issue was just that it was Jace Cho'Gath, wasn't it? I recall.
Yes, this is the game where Max fucked his pathing. Remember, he like didn't take a Krug for like 5 minutes. Okay, that's obviously an exaggeration, but like he super fucks his pathing.
He got 3 buffs
to gank top.
Yeah,
he got 3 buffs.
He got 3 to gank top. So there were definitely issues with how both teams played it out. I think that there was less pressure topside. But part of it was every time. I also think that every time Bjergsen and Svenskeren have priority and they can make a play together, like they push out mid lane together, like the few times that they do this, they just always like contest the same patch of vision. They could have made more plays to the top side. It's just like, again, the very limited notion of the playbook that TSM seem to be. Yes. You see all these opportunities off of advantages that Bjergsen gets, just don't execute on. It's really bizarre.
Okay.
I mean, so you can do mid game like this.
My original question, Veteran, was: is there blame for Bjergsen and Doublelift individually?
Individually, I mean, this definitely wasn't Doublelift's best tournament, and people are mostly just going to remember his flashes and stuff. But I think that this is a systemic. No, it wasn't even a team breakdown. I just think that there's evidently some fundamentals that are not being applied properly when it comes to TSM. That's not going to be abused on the international stage.
Apparently no one's fault though. You have to understand, like, it wasn't Bjergsen's fault he's really good, it wasn't Doublelift's fault he's really good, it wasn't the coach's fault because now people feel sorry for him, it wasn't Haunter's fault because he's a really good top laner, it was Svenskeren's fault because we all hate him because he used to be apparently a mild racist.
Why does it have to be no one's fault? Can't it be everyone's fault? That's
my question,
opinion on this type of thing.
Apparently it can't be though.
Everybody obviously did something like wrong. No team has like 5 perfect players or whatever. Sure. But there were some endemically wrong things going on in almost every position on TSM's part, including the coach. And it all got blown apart here. But what kind of standard are we holding them to? Because in the end of the day, these guys are probably going to win an A again. Even if they stuck together as they are now, I wouldn't be surprised if they won an A again.
Wait a minute, what do you mean? What kind of standard are we holding them to? I mean, here's the standard we're holding them to, Veteran, is if Perks does well or does badly, it doesn't matter because even though he wins the LCS, no one will ever say Perks is a top 10 player in the world. It will never happen. But you know what? They say Bjergsen is a top 10 player in the world every single Worlds. And by the way, I don't say they as in TSM fans, people on Reddit. No, the most knowledgeable people in the public eye about League of Legends tell you every year Bjergsen is a top 10 player. And then listen, I'm not bagging on you here, but then when I bring up, does he ever have big games? You guys all tell me, no one can. It's like brilliant. So it's not everyone's fault, but the star players don't ever have to have star player games. Am I the one in the mental asylum here? What's going on?
Hey, if Kelsey is telling you all this stuff, then like that's just indefensible stuff from her, to be honest. But in my opinion, I've never been in a situation where I thought that if I took Bjergsen over a large amount of European mid laners, it would dramatically change my team. Like,
but here's the problem, veteran.
This is the test I did with Dade, because I always thought that there were plenty of European players I'd rather take over Dade back when Dade was super hyped, because Dade had breathtaking champion pool issues and evidently did not want to adapt to certain metas. I would never take a type of player like that, so he failed at test immediately, so I'm not going to hold up Dade as top 2 in the world like people were back then. With Bjergsen, it's literally as being like that. I've never been on a team where I thought, well, if we play against TSM, Bjergsen's just going to shit all over my mid laner. In Europe, that doesn't exist. It never has. It's proven. Can people actually find me like a consistent set of ridiculous performances outside of Rift rivals from Bjergsen versus EU mids? And that was against Exile. Like, it doesn't exist. It actually doesn't exist. But people have somehow like convinced themselves of like Bjergsen's good. He's not the faker of the West. And I wouldn't be going so hard on this if it wasn't for the fact that Jensen has been getting a ton of shit every year, every time he fucks up, and he never feels like he needs to tweet about it. I just want to throw this out, and this guy throws everything on himself. And then Bjergsen was never. I can't find these comments that were blaming Bjergsen. Immediately tweets about it, so I'm a bit miffed about that. But like I do think that Bjergsen's being like raised to a much higher stand than he ever should have been. I've never been in a situation where I thought that like he's going to go fucking faker ballistic on whatever, including like National League European players who put them in LCS split. Like,
I mean, I'll give you my perspective, okay, just as a complete outsider. The reason why I want to know kind of what you think of whether or not he was to blame or just underperformed is because if I think of the context of how every Bjergsen discussion happens that isn't at Worlds, it always goes like this. Well, of course Bjergsen's a better mid laner than Jensen, because ignore every stat, ignore every time he was outlaned, ignore every time his team won the game off something else, because you know what? He was making all those roams and he made these key decisions in the other part of the game, and then go back a few seasons when Bjergsen and Froggen were like each the best in their regions. Oh, well, Froggen can't be as good because he's just laning and then late game team fighting. Bjergsen roams, and what they try to imply is that when the player doesn't lane like a god, it doesn't matter because he took his impact to other lanes and he's the reason they won the game, right? If you've set that up as the context for why the guy's so good, it's not unfair to then look at the biggest games he plays in his career and go, why isn't he doing any of that shit? And then they go, reasons, you know, like if that's his strength, apply it, you know.
I think I disagree with the weird narrative that Bjergsen is like the roaming god of NA and that Jensen is
they're making
the laning
extreme
pressure
one.
mid.
Okay.
Like, because I don't necessarily even think Bjergsen is like the roaming god of NA. I think that like even you said it earlier in the show, right? Was that like Bjergsen has to do all that himself, which is just like get his own priority and off of which the rest of the map plays. And like the rest of the map just plays off of the fact that he has priority mid. He doesn't necessarily like do anything special with priority mid himself. It's just that like he gets it himself and his team wins off of it like super hard. And so for me, like the fact that he's doing it consistently himself is very important in my eyes. I don't necessarily think Jensen and Bjergsen do like completely different things in that regard. I think that the lanes on TSM theoretically are better at responding to like Bjergsen having really huge leads.
Yes.
But
doesn't that also set you up though for more criticism if you lose? That you get the priority and the focus and you get your picks and then you go, oh, well, I had an all right game. You know, other people shit the bed. It's like, well,
I mean, this is a weird part though. Where do you then draw the line between this is Bjergsen's fault and this is like Sven Skeren and Path's fault, for example, that they never do anything more than like get vision around the exact same area around race whenever Bjergsen has pressure. Like he's not like roaming bot and like getting a fucking triple kill every time. Is that on Sven Skeren's calls of like, oh, you have pressure, I'm down here, we can do something with this, and they always end up with the same vision thing? Is that on Path for teaching them the game this way?
I mean, Path wasn't the coach.
This is an endemic thing.
Path wasn't the coach when they had Santorin and they did the passive jungle style.
So is it on Reginald? Like, this is an endemic situation. Like, this is a situation where something's evidently gone wrong at the fundamentals of the team. Okay. Like, it's not something you can blame a single person. But if you're expecting Bjergsen to suddenly come up clutch on the international stage and solo carry TSM out of groups, you're thinking of a player that never existed.
Okay.
I think, the one game like against Misfits that they did win, like was the Bjergsen that people talk about. Like he did, like sure, Misfits made a ton of mistakes that game, and their comp was like certainly unwinnable after a certain point. But like he actually, like his Cassiopeia won that game for them. Like Bjergsen won that game for them.
Yeah, that's true. He's the best player on that team.
The other aspect that, like, I set this up at the very beginning. Okay, we've come full circle. This game was won by junglers. Okay, I think the fact that the other mid laners had junglers who were like willing to set up the lane for them. Like whenever you talked about the thing that Svenskeren doesn't really do in terms of like setting up a good back for mid, Maxlor is like really good at doing stuff like that. Even if like he had weird pathing issues in the one game against TSM, Maxlor is really good at setting up for his lanes to get better back timings. They started doing that much more with Power of Evil, for example. They started, like, Maxlor loves like giving vision to his lanes so that they can get like the advantages they need in that regard. And he's like good at identifying which lane generally he should play around at a given instant. So I think like the game was determined in a lot of ways by that type of play and that type of thinking, which just like wasn't present on TSM. And I do think, okay. You do give Bjergsen some blame for that. I think like there should be better coordination. Like he should be to an extent calling like his jungler, come to my lane, right? Bjergsen should be calling that. So yeah, I mean,
which is, by the way, the most whack narrative in the entire world. Like, fuck all of you who set this up, who were like, well, a perfect team wouldn't have shot callers. And so as a result, we can never, ever blame anyone. Because it's like, well, no one knows who made that call. So then no one's ever to blame. I mean, by the way, Veteran actually solved that about 2 minutes ago. The solution is this. If you don't have shot callers, you're all to blame. There we go. Problem solved. You're all shit. Get out.
I mean, equally, if you do have shot callers, equally, if you do have shot callers, is it like on everybody else for not stepping up for shot calling, and this guy evidently has the wrong decision? Like, do you just not blame the silence?
Veteran, the team that you just described, TSM, doesn't have any shot callers, mate. Right?
No idea. Maybe
it doesn't
they do
sound like it, right? It doesn't really sound like it.
It doesn't.
So they just like
to me. It's a silent team, but I have no clue.
The way they do it is they cover the mini map. It's like, oh, it's about 9 minutes. We should go to blue buff right now. Sounds good.
No, they have one of those, like, you know, like out of a cartoon, they have one of those old-fashioned alarm clocks that goes, and then Svenskeren goes over to the blue buff no matter what. And, you know, if it's not there, he's like, oh, fucking clock's broken again. I need a new one, Reginald. Okay, here's a question then, Veteran.
So,
if someone is as dominant as Bjergsen is generally in his career, you can't just eliminate him from being a great player because he didn't have fantastic international. No, I didn't say you did it. I'm talking, you is like a plural context there, mate. It's like referring to the royal you. So, in this scenario, how do you weigh it up?
How do I weigh what up?
Like, you went too far there. You were implying like you would never take Bjergsen over like any of the EU mids ever in history. Like, come on.
No, I mean,
none of those guys are going to have a 6-year career.
I can personally think of 3 rookie mids in Europe.
Right, come on, give us them then. Make the meme. Come on. Give us the 3.
I mean, the most obvious one is Casual. The other 2 I'm back pocketing right now for the nowhere that I'm going.
So you're picking people who've never even played in LCS, never done anything in their entire careers, and have never in any way given you any evidence beyond things you've seen privately.
Not played in LCS, yes. Right? Not played in LCS, yes. Right. Not done anything in their careers, no. But not played in LCS, yes. But that's from a standpoint where, in my opinion, it is much easier to work with players like that and bring them up to a certain level than it is to work with players that are set in their ways like Bjergsen and bring them down. Like on my episode I did with you of Ryu, I actually got into this pretty heavily. Like, I don't necessarily believe in purely taking veteran players. So yeah, I do believe that I could take rookies and I could easily make a team that would comfortably beat TSM.
Well,
I would not be...
In your own way, Veteran, you have fulfilled the role of LS on this show, because that is a very LS-type statement, you know. He's the guy who could always get you the 5 people out of Korean solo
I've already won because I've started in Europe. I've started in Europe, So if I meet TSM, I'm already good enough to be on an international stage. I'm in European, and I'm already good enough to be on the international stage. Apparently, I'm more than good enough to get out of a group the TSM is in, unless I'm like spliced. But even then, I can apparently beat RNG, So
So here's the thing, okay,
which they couldn't do once.
To kind of close the TSM topic, because we have spent a long time on it, obviously. I will say this. I actually think a point that I made that people, because there's a million things to discuss about the team, people probably missed out on, is that when you look at the fact that TSM, not only were they favoured to win this group, but they weren't even that far off even with these bad performances. Like, the point I made was... They should literally be on their knees thanking all of the fates and coincidence and circumstances that they didn't win the group. Because if they'd have won the group, they would have played Cloud9 in the round of 8 and potentially have made top 4 while being a massively flawed team who definitely should not continue with this 5-man unit and coaching staff.
In place of them is another team that is massively flawed, but they are in their first split.
No, but the point is, it would be worse for TSM if they'd have gotten a couple of breaks the right way and made it to the top 4, right? Then they'd use this fucked up logic, veteran. Well, we were top 4. Maybe next year we can do better. Stick with the same team. Let's run the same thing again. Let's practice really hard. If anything, hasn't this shown us something probably drastic has to change in TSM, right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think the big issue of North America as a whole is that North America accelerated far too fast, although I think this is a big problem with the West in general. And what happens when you do that, when you just end up dumping a shit ton of money into a region like North America, is they start imagining ways to spend it. So they're like, oh, now we can get good infrastructure. And they look around and who the fuck knows what good infrastructure is? Literally none of them, because none of them have lived through a scene that has developed infrastructure in the way that the Korean scene did over the course of 25 years, which is literally like, oh, this works, we should keep doing this. This doesn't work, we obviously shouldn't do that. You know, they've actually just naturally learned. TSM and the rest of North America all had the money to be like, okay, this is my idea in my head of what good infrastructure is. And a lot of teams in the West have done this, and they have immediately poured money into doing that. And now you're going to spend the entire time trying to fix the ideal, even if you have no idea if the ideal is actually the ideal and what should work.
That's what you call a feedback loop, though, veteran. Because what happens is everyone who has good infrastructure makes a narrative which they then believe. Like, I'll give you a couple from history. Everyone thinks I'm going to...
It's true.
No, everyone thinks I'm going to say Weldon, right? I'm not. What I'm going to mention to you is, do you remember when SK Gaming first got really good in Europe, and it was all because they had a sports psychologist? Do you remember?
Yes, I remember that.
Now, no one else remembers that, veteran, because it didn't matter beyond that. Like, they went to Worlds, didn't do what they
And no one explored why it works for them specifically. No. People just randomly got sports psychologists. Nip had a sports psychologist. They just bombed out, and we
the easiest example to point out is that like the entire Chinese scene. Oh, yes, Starhorn Royal Club made it to the final with Koreans. We should all get Koreans, like as if that was like literally the thing. And it was really bizarre that this was literally the mentality that it went out like this. It was so weird. Like that's the easiest example.
I think European teams have been saved many times by not having the money to actually delve into these delusions. Because when NA starts spending all of their fucking money and tell me how they have like position coaches in every single goddamn role and a builds analyst and a stats analyst and a damage percentage analyst at 9 minutes, and they can calculate exactly the way that they should be praying to Mecha or whatever. Like when they do that, I know you've just solidified the wrong way to do things, and you're going to do this for a year. All right. And meanwhile, like H2K can only afford Prolly, and then they could barely afford me, and then it's literally like, oh, we're working with bare bones. We don't have as much infrastructure as NA. That's good. We're actually going to have to learn what works and what doesn't, instead of thinking that we are fucking smart genius enough to look into the future and see the perfect Europe or perfect North America like all of these idiots have. Do you actually think that any of these owners know what perfect infrastructure looks like for the West? Do you think any of them even know what infrastructure looks like in Korea? None of them do. You're deluding yourself if you think you do. You fucked up the region by thinking that you do. And franchising is going to accelerate that. I'm not worried about NA next split either. You can only overrate NA.
Okay, you can only overrate it. Then. But obviously, we can't go into all 16 teams to this level of depth. So, come on.
And by the way, the only correct answer to what good infrastructure is, if you're genuinely committed to it, if you're genuinely committed to making the best team possible, is I don't fucking know. But I'll learn.
Well, I've literally never understood. No joke. Like, here's the thing: if you're a team that has like a certain amount of funds, and you can only spend something on so much, that's one thing. But if you are TSM, you have consistently had among the most funds of any team outside of Asia, basically. And so, what blows my mind, legitimately, is that you haven't found any way to literally figure out what even is the setup of a Korean team. Like, get people who used to work with them, get players who used to be with them, ask them.
But does that work?
I mean, theoretically,
it's a different culture.
But they haven't even done step one, veteran. They don't even know.
No, they haven't. It's very true. They haven't.
The first thing you would do is like a survey. If you're going to do business, right, the first thing you do when you move into a new market is you assess the market. You find out who's successful there. What are the factors that make... Now, it doesn't mean you're just going to copy their formula. Logically, that wouldn't work. They're doing it better than you are. But you would at least figure out, like, oh, I'm going into water now. I will need to be able to breathe air. You've got to figure out the basics,
assuming
right?
that there has been like at least some basic, like, okay, we're importing a ton of Koreans. We should at least ask them like what their team environment looks like.
I would go ahead and bet they don't.
Like the setup where it's like, oh, okay, what do Korean coaches do in scrims?
I would go ahead and bet they don't.
Don't shake your fucking head. You know for a fact that coaches have asked their players like, what do Korean coaches do in scrims?
Yeah, and that's not gonna tell you what Korean coaches do in scrims. That's gonna tell you what that player wants you to do in a scrim. Most of the research that the orgs do. I'm saying
like there's enough like shared feedback information to at least like form some sort of conception. I'm saying it's imperfect, but there has been like research to an extent on what like is available. There's like are you going to just send people to like a team environment to see if that they can watch like these scrims? Because teams are not going to let you do that. Like there's a limitation to the amount of stuff that you can do.
Yeah. I mean, Thorin's arguing that we should do that, but I don't even think that's necessary. I think we need to figure out our own system. We need to figure out what works and what doesn't, and we need to develop our infrastructure over the course of time. It might be much simpler. And if you were trying
to do that, probably the simplest way would be to find out what has worked and then at least test or decide what you're going to do.
Yes, but when all of this happened, Riot literally forced coaches on everyone. So there were plenty of people who weren't coaches. There was zero coaching history in League of Legends. The whole thing was artificially inflated. Yes. This is what I'm talking about. And then in North America, it was artificially inflated even further by all of the investors Riot somehow managed to attract after they solidified the positions of coach and manager. Coach and manager being a separate role, by the way, fucks with my head sometimes because people are literally so simple that they will turn the manager role into an all-encompassing like team manager role, even though right now on the Riot form it's literally just this guy does the fucking admin work and he's our contact point for the team. But now so many things that would otherwise be the coach's job in any other esport and in a lot of sports where coach and manager almost interchangeable have suddenly been taken away because orgs want to take this dichotomy seriously.
Arranged scrims, what do you mean?
Sometimes there's arranged scrims. Sometimes managers even try to actually have more influence on the game than they otherwise should. Probably was very good at avoiding that. Some managers, so there's a lot of stuff to do with schedule, for example, that managers will take away from the coach. Right. In a lot of teams. I obviously cannot name names at this point. Sure. But if you're a coach and you don't have full autonomy over your own schedule, like that's could be really damaging. In the off season, a lot of coaches opt not to be a part of roster changes, but there are a lot of managers who 100% make roster changes their final decision. Like, and I think that's wrong a lot, to be honest.
I mean, I'll just go ahead and tell you this, okay?
That's being forced by Riot.
Here's a weird detail, okay? Because I'll purposely tell you this just so that it's like not a diss on the people because it worked out okay. But I will tell you that famous story, which I've obviously recounted before, where I was talking to Fnatic and they wanted me to be their coach. Essentially, most of the roster moves that made the lineup that was very good were not... I was going to be the coach, so there was no coach making any of those roster moves. Like, they recruited that whole team, which, by the way, everyone, it could have very well completely failed and been a complete clusterfuck. That wasn't done by anyone who knew about League of Legends. That was done by people who are managers, who were just within the org, who have esports history, but no League of Legends history. They just literally... They were the scouts somehow,
They were relying on, like... Korean agents, which is another big problem in the scene, is that people like listen to the Korean agents on imports without like full check. Like obviously they have an incentive to we're probably going to get part of a cut for like giving you
commission, hooking this up with you. So it's like
obviously people aren't necessarily like second guessing, oh, you know, Hachani, really good player, made LCK final, you know,
I mean, listen,
or something
let's
like
be
this.
real.
Hey, this guy totally speaks English, by the way. Literally picks up at the airport, finds out doesn't speak a word of English. It's literally something that's happened in the LCS, by the way.
I mean, listen,
like,
veteran, to this day, Team Liquid will tell you Piglet speaks English. I've met the guy, spoken to him, nothing. Literally nothing. Absolutely nothing, mate. Nothing was getting through. So, okay, that's just a joke.
the epitome of what I'm talking about, by the way.
But okay.
All
the people, though, who are agents, by the way. All the agents are just used car salesmen, you know.
They are. No,
one
they
owner,
really are.
really good,
Really
you know,
are.
took good care of it. Old lady, only went to the shops 2 times a week. They're all just like that. So, okay, Kelsey, why did Team WE win Group D?
I believe that Team WE won Group D because they came in with an ability to... They went back to something they're very good at, which is just like give Xia a champion that he can like really control lane on. We can rotate based on like a Caitlyn style composition and go top. And they're just like kind of went for champions that people weren't really prioritizing.
I did
like
say
Rumble,
give him the corky.
like Rumble, Jace, Caitlyn, none of these champions, like no one was prioritizing this stuff. This is like a very Chinese meta way of playing the game where you like have focus on support, mid setups, and you just transition your bot lane based on like mid control. And that they just like won the last day of groups with that. I don't know if this isn't like something sustainable, because now even other teams are playing this style of composition based on the fact that like Chinese teams are playing it, and it's, oh, whoa, look, this is really good. So I don't know. I think this was like kind of a WE adapted and did something different in the second week. This is something that a lot of NA teams and maybe even like G2 to an extent didn't do. Like they didn't necessarily change up what they were doing, and you could see teams that did that and teams that didn't, and then suddenly like Cloud9's like, oh, strong lanes are good, you know? It was in the last game against HQ that they played, I think.
Because you know, the big problem with all the discussions we just had about TSM is, unfortunately, we ourselves get caught into we get gaslit in our own lives. We start talking about TSM relative to Koreans and being like, well, you can't blame them because everyone else in the West, right? Guys, Team WE and Misfits were the ones who got out of this group. They're going to the playoffs. Like, these aren't teams that are like the best in their regions in a world class. Like, the problems with all the TSM issues is they have all the resources, all the history, all the star players, and they aren't getting past these teams, you know. It's not like they lost to SK Telecom. Veteran, is WE going to beat Cloud9?
Most likely, yes, in my opinion. Again, I mentioned before that Cloud9 have breathtaking issues with their bot lane that I believe are very abusable, and WE love to play very bot-centric. And I think that's the only real way Cloud9 is going to win is if Jensen becomes incarnation for the game, because they essentially they don't play around mid the same way that say RNG do, where they like permagank it or whatever. So
when you say becomes incarnation, you mean just like roam around the map killing everyone? Oh, right. You don't think Jensen's good?
I think Jensen's good, and when he's good, I call him Incarnation. I normally call him Incarnation. I don't like the name change.
No, I like that. Here, the reason I like that, Veteran, is because I actually do a similar thing in CSGO. What happened is one of my favorite players in CSGO is called Device, and he's a very good player, but famously, he often choked in big games. So since at one point he tried to change his alias to Deve, which is apparently like what people call him, you know, like a nickname in Denmark, but he wasn't actually allowed to by Valve because they'd already done all these like features on him when he was called Device. They were like, well, we're not going to do features and let you change your name. So as a result, I use the same joke, right? When he goes off, I just say that, you know, he transformed into Deve, but when he does a shit game, I'm like, yeah, that was Device. Like, yeah, I hate when that guy turns up, you know. So it's not about
Chinese fans do that with Nam Devil. Yeah, so.
Yes. That. If he's Incarnation, then I think he prevents WE having such strong side lane control as they normally do off of Xia later on. And I think that will be their way of disrupting what WE want to do around the bot lane. Purely because they managed to abandon Xia a lot of games.
To an extent, I disagree with you because I think that like when Jensen and Constructs are working together, they do the heavy gank mid thing, which is why I think that like this is the way that Cloud9 win also. The problem is again, like both bot lanes will kind of... It's interesting to me because both bot lanes have a tendency to just like give up kills randomly. It's like almost like the Samsung Blue Deft comparison where he just like ints randomly in lane, and then like the bot lanes play really well in team fights. But I think that WE as a team tend to get more on the other side of the map for their bot lane dying or like overextending in the jungle ganking. I think like 957 is good about pushing out the lane and then getting vision control topside when they see jungle bot and stuff like this, but better than a Cloud9 who just in general, like their map doesn't have as much coordination between lanes.
Okay.
Sure, I want to clarify that I meant WE were the ones that aren't like permanent.
Oh, right. Okay, sure.
Cloud9.
Right. Well, Misfits got out of the group and are obviously going straight into SK Telecom and Veteran. Right, you know a lot of the people who are the coaches and stuff in the game. Obviously, they're part of your, I'd say, like, guild of fucking Twitter analysts turned people who now get paid to do the same thing. So, the guy who is, like, the coach of Misfits Veteran, I'm not buying for 1 second what he is selling on Twitter, that he actually wants to play SK Telecom. And, you know, like, SK Telecom has no idea what Misfits is about to do to them. And all this jazz that sounds like the shittest wrestling promo I've ever heard. Do you think he actually believes that?
Well, do you think he'd rather play against Longzhu, who have shit-stomped this team? Or,
well, first of all, that's irrelevant. Mate. I'd rather won the group and play Cloud9 myself.
Or, okay, yeah, that's obviously true.
You know?
But his choices right now, out of that, are literally Longzhu,
yes,
RNG.
Right.
That's not
I'd definitely rather have RNG.
You'd rather have RNG, because this is what's going to happen. You're most likely going to lose to RNG. You were hella struggling against WE, and RNG do not have the same weaknesses as WE that you're exploiting. In fact, they're very strong in those areas.
Okay.
And you're not going to be able to say a Korean team knocked you out. Whereas if I'm losing to SKT, it blows. I lost to SKT, guys. What can I really do?
No, but he's legitimately implying Misfits can do something against SKT. Do you agree?
Well, of course. But if he implies that he does something against RNG and he loses,
right? Okay,
it's a much.
I can see that rationale, but okay, let's transition this then. Can they do anything against SK Telecom?
No.
I think in their heads they can, because like SK Telecom's early game isn't as strong, but I mean SK are basically WE with a much better mid laner in a lot of ways.
Some would say the best.
Yeah. There are definitely differences in this team's makeup, but like that's the part that's going to be really relevant, I think. So to me, that's just like the team automatically falls apart. The setup automatically falls apart. Like Misfits can get all the lead that they wanted against WE, but WE's setup around Baron, like their wave control around Baron was just like so much better that they always had priority over this objective. Like Misfits basically said we only just started playing with like side wave control in play.
Right, okay. Just to clarify, you said that Misfits only started playing with side lanes in the playoffs or something?
I mean, more specifically, like we only started playing to like side wave control around mid game, like instead of just grouping, because what Misfits would very often do is instead of like playing out 1-4 and pressuring like the bottom lane turret or whatever, what they do is that they would just group. They would try to bait Baron and then bait the enemy teleport out so that they didn't have to pressure bot lane, because they didn't really know like when the wave was good for them, like how to set this up. So they only started like really playing with this and doing this better instead of like just grouping for vision consistently, starting with playoffs.
Okay.
Effectively is what.
So Veteran. Misfits is a team where, thanks to their world's performance, it is their jungler and top who are getting all the praise. Now, the players on SK Telecom who get shot on the most, jungler and top lane. There's no potential dynamic there that gives Misfits a chance?
I mean, the really strong thing that the jungler does for Misfits right now is secure really strong backs for his mid laner. And they're going to have a really hard time playing around their mid laner versus SKT. And then even if they are able to pull this off, and are able to pull ahead of a lead, which I find very unlikely to actually occur in the same as it did versus WE. Okay, AHQ did, sure, but I am not about to see Power of Evil bash out an assassin, and I'm not about to see Alfari go Shen and have them do that ridiculous comp.
No, but I will say this. Okay, so you notice, you must have seen that, like, I mean, like a Facebook post.
They have played Shen long.
In group stage, they played.
Yeah, there was like a Facebook post where Power of Evil defended in depth his Nashor's Tooth build on, I think it's Orianna, right? I just double fucking dare you, Power of Evil, to use that build in this series. Like, if you think it works, if you think you can survive that dog shit middle part, Just go for it, mate. Do it. Show us how it works against Faker. I just want to see it. You know, if you're going to just go out like a champ, do it.
I think if he goes Orianna versus Faker, they lose the game. I think if they go anything other than a really strong early pressure comp against SKT, they will lose the game unless they leap and bound ahead of their current understanding of vision control and Baron control in the mid to late game. They will lose the game. So I think that playing off of early game snowball like AHQ were doing is the best way to do it. Max Law's propensity to actually fuck everything and just deep ward like fucking keep track of enemy jungler would do really well here, and it's easy to do that with the current state of the jungle. Like these are the ways that Misfits can win, but then once they get to the mid to late game, SKT are the kings of control at this point, and they weren't able to do anything against WE. So I don't have that high hopes for them at this against SKT, but obviously. This is all.
Okay, right. In
Did
Group B...
Did I vanish?
No, that's just usually the sort of... Like, she usually has that face, and then she waits until like the second after you talk, and then she starts talking, but she didn't. So, in this scenario, we will now transition the topic. So, in Group B, we had the miraculous return from the dead of Fnatic, led by our European messiah, Soaz, who is... What he did was, he became dyslexic, and instead of playing dog champions, he played god champions. So how did Fnatic turn it all around, Kelsey, get out of this group, and what do you think of this version of Fnatic, if they can indeed maintain that?
I mean, I think that Fnatic, instead of just playing around bot, made themselves slightly less predictable in sometimes playing around top. And then I would say in regular season, they played around top in a sense that, like, when Soaz had a strong matchup with, like, Jarvan or Gnar, they would, sometimes deny a camp or something on top side. Or Roxa would be on that side and he wouldn't necessarily take advantage of bot. But the problem is the Fnatic don't necessarily, like, play around more than one lane at once. They just, like, varied kind of the lane that they're playing around. They went more often for mid control, but we've seen them do this like in playoffs, in Gauntlet. Like they've been able to show signs. It's just like they're a super emotional team and something goes wrong and then they just like default to let's camp bot. So I think things went right for them. That was great. Like they told themselves, oh, okay. They got the biggest birthday present at the very start of the day before they even play a game where Gigabyte Marines beat Immortals. After that, it's like, great, we don't have to beat Longju. So it's like nothing can like piss us off, right? And Jesse's made like this like ridiculous line where he says, we all faced death in a way, right? And so like we stopped being selfish little babies and everything to an extent. We came together, we pulled it through, it came out. It's like, does this work in quarterfinals? And Reckless already answered that in an interview with Travis, which was it would take a miracle. So before he even knew the group draw. So there we go.
Wait a minute. Yes, but listen, I realise it's Fnatic, so it's not the context of a Korean team. But everyone has super hard pushed the narrative that RNG will fall apart in best of 5 series. So is there no way that Fnatic can be one of the teams to exploit that? I
mean, okay, I've been going back and forth around this in my head, because on the one hand, Fnatic's big issue with mid-priority is also a big area where RNG have a lot of priority, especially in the early game. So if Caps is abandoned, I feel like he's going to be food for Zhao, and then Zhao is going to be an absolute monster in side lanes later on. But say we get to that point anyway, and Fnatic insists on doing this 1-1-3 playstyle, Zhao can be about as ahead as he wants, and I'm not sure that that's actually going to be enough to control side lane against this comp. So long as Fnatic is able to get Syndra, Cassio, these types of laners, which is, by the way, the exact thing that they did in the Gauntlet that was different to playoffs, and the thing they did in week 2 that was different to week 1. They actually gave Caps champs that will hold mid solo really easily when they do their 1-1-3 formation, because they're allergic to just sending Reckless mid for some weird reason. Would that be enough? Maybe, but then I think about the fact that RNG don't actually go for like hard shoves mid like G2 were, which really fucked them over against RNG. Okay. They go for like, if they get something like Twitch, then they will push it to mid, let it reset, but they will never actually extend beyond mid. And they will simply use that to pressure side lanes anyway, in which case Zhao is going to have pressure regardless, and you're not going to be able to use your 1-1-3 as effectively as you might want to in this type of scenario. So I think if you deny Uzi Twitch and you are able to secure a Syndra, a Cassio, something like this for caps in the mid lane, then I think Fnatic have a setup where they might actually be able to contest what RNG likes to do in the mid to late game, so long as Reckless hasn't just been utterly shat on in lane by Uzi or whatever. I think that's like the scenario where they're able to do it. But that is so fucking specific that I don't think if RNG gets exploited in the best of 5, that this is the series where it happens. This is because Fnatic haven't changed and deviated much from this playstyle for a while. The only time it works is legit this specific scenario. I don't think that they're going to suddenly bust out some super adaptable best of 5 strategy. Like I'm eliminating that entirely.
I think part of the reason why they aren't. I think part of the reason why it wouldn't necessarily, like the 1-1-3 still wouldn't necessarily work is like the LPL answer is obviously just like play a super aggressive mid pick and then like whatever AD side lane AD Reckless picks. And if they're doing 1-1-3, then they can still do that. They can still like shut down side lane AD carry compositions really hard. So that would be
very easy.
Yeah, if they have a Galio, but it just depends. For me though, the thing that comes down to it is that I think RNG have played really well around lane setup, getting Xiaohu ahead, except they will sacrifice side lanes for it. They will sacrifice objectives that you get like with side lane pressure for it. So it depends to an extent. Like basically these teams will knowingly make a trade where Fnatic will say, okay, we'll give up mid pressure for side lanes. And RNG will say, okay, we'll give up side lanes for mid. Usually that works out in the favor of mid lane. And because like mid lane will give you more control over the map overall. The other issue that I see coming out though is that like I think RNG will play too much to get a good wave for bot. Or they'll like expect bot to have control on its own to an extent too much, or like they have transitioned in this tournament from playing around mid to playing around bot more, and it's still a little shaky. And when they tried to do that in the LPL final over the 5-game series, like this is where things went wrong for them. And I think that they won't, like for example, in the G2 series, there was a section where they gave up mid so that RNG could have a good back, could push out the wave like after a successful gank where jungle and bot lane were all low health, and they had Xiaohu like come bot so to help them reset the wave so that they could go back. And then on the next play, like basically Perks has priority mid from that, can go bot, RNG misinterpret like where he's going, and then they just lose the game off of that dive. So I think that there are definitely like areas where RNG make mistakes in transitioning pressure from their lanes, or are willing to give up too much for like one particular carry that can be exploited, because like Fnatic have done similar things as well. So I don't necessarily think this is like a straight cut like RNG are so much better than Fnatic like sort of matchup. I think that there are a lot of openings. It's just like I also think it'll be really exciting if it gets to a point where it's about 80 carries and map play. I think RNG's mid to late map play is a little bit better. But if it gets to like team fights and stuff, like Reckless versus UZI will actually finally be the match that it's always supposed to be, you know? Like it was always supposed to be the super hype, like amazing, like Reckless's Chinese nickname is European Wei Zhao, right? So it's supposed
by the way,
to be
even
this.
more disrespectful nickname than fucking NA Faker for Bjerg. Fuck every Chinese fan who came up with that back in like season 4.
Hey,
you.
Reckless is good now. Reckless is good now.
No,
now
but they did it in season 4 when he was the fucking
okay, then I understand the anger a little.
Like, do you realise for me?
It's always tilted me.
I love this timeline personally, because this timeline has been like the ultimate revenge on all you fucks from season 4 who were telling me that like fucking Bjergsen and Reckless were like the pinnacle of the position in the West. It's like, no, here's the secret. Okay, I'll probably make a video on this separately. Here's the secret to all Western stars. None of them are geniuses who are well-rounded and can adapt to every style. What happens is they all have one general style that they're amazing at, and a couple of them, like I'll give props to Reckless, he has changed up. Most of them don't ever change. They find success with that style and they just ride it out, and then when the meta doesn't work, they go downhill. And what happens is Reckless and Bjergsen just came along a bit later than the ones who were the original stars in Season 2. So the only reason they got to the top is because they played the style that worked at the time, and then when it was no longer their era, they fell away, and the people who came up next were the ones who fit the next style. And the same little fucking merry-go-round will continue, and in 3 years, let's see if Perks is still one of the best mid laners, or maybe he will have fallen away. So, transitioning that topic. Actually, I've got one last question on the RNG thing. Kelsey, RNG, a Chinese team, 2-0 the Korean team. This is no fucking joke. It happened. What would you have to say about this?
I mean, I think it's really cool. I think that it's like all of the right storyline buttons are ticked, right? Like, the Royal organization was the one that started a lot of the import stuff that I think made teams not focus on like how to become better as a unit, and made teams think that they needed like stars to instead of just like focusing on macro and team play. Now they're the organization that's coming in and they're 2-0ing like a Korean team with an all Chinese roster in China, right? In China, their coach is like, I knew this. If this was going to be an all-Chinese team, I'd be super motivated. I hope that like the success of this Chinese team motivates other people to like build all-Chinese rosters. Like, this is the story that's supposed to be pushed. Of course, like if it ends up in a scenario where they lose to Fnatic, then W make it further in the tournament than them, then maybe it just like all goes back to Season 4 Royal. But whatever, I think it's like a really cool storyline. Because after all, like even though Season 4 Royal lost, OMG, the all-Chinese team was the team that beats Najin that everyone just like conveniently forgets. So it could end up being exactly the same. But right now, super cool storyline, really exciting. I think RNG exploited a lot of the weaknesses that Samsung have. And like Samsung also, they mental mind gamed Samsung into playing Haru, allegedly. At least that's what like the support said. It's like, oh, we lost early to RNG, so we had to play early game, and that's why Haru's playing together. It's like, yeah, sure, okay. So,
because you know that whole narrative of the West, like, well, no one's China, no one's Korea, rather. You know, we all suck because we're not Korea. Like, fuck you. Let me know when you do anything else. Let me know when you 2-0 a Korean team. Never happened, never will. Right, Veteran, what do you think about G2's performance overall? Obviously, we don't have a massive amount of time, but give me your thoughts, G2.
I mean, they're trying to be... Okay, so obviously the line is that they are like being SKT light, but like a worse version of it, right? And I think the big issue that messed them up versus teams like RNG was essentially their over-prioritization of the push mid. That is essentially what caught them out repeatedly versus RNG and lost them the first game against them. Obviously they did a lot better the second time around. And I think that when it came to the Samsung games as well, this was something that was super costing them. But I think obviously, okay, the line, and this is a very true line, is that they were definitely the best European team there. They were the European team that actually understood how to play the control game mid to late.
Were they the best Western team there?
Yes, they were the best Western team there.
Okay.
For sure. And
what
I do honestly...
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I mean, again, they were the only team that understood sideway control in the mid to late game. They were the only team that were actually able to play this type of control style in the mid to late game and understood the necessity of it out of all of the European teams. But they had this tendency to over-prioritize the mid push, which is something that only Carry inherited. If he's watching this, he knows that. And it's something that was very punishing to them versus a meta that had started evolving towards more like soft pushes mid rather than straight up hard pushes, which is also something that messed over TSM. Actually, this is something that messed over TSM in mid to late game as well.
Yes.
Any thoughts on G2, Kelsey?
I also think that G2 have always had an issue with kind of like adapting to the change in the game, even if it's not like patch change, if it's just the different team and how the different team is playing. Yeah, like G2 are really bad at doing this. And I think that like they're still playing when teams were looking to more like strong lanes versus Samsung, they got like really exploited like Samsung, they got exploited by Samsung playing strong lanes, like of all the teams. They in the final game, and like they played this weird setup with, they basically had no pressure on it in any position except mid, and they just got completely destroyed for it. So I don't know, like they themselves have acknowledged yeah, it was Zach versus Kazakhs. They themselves have acknowledged that they are bad in this type of scenario. So, I mean, they would have to figure out why, if this team stayed together, which they basically made it very clear that they aren't at this point. That would be something that they need to fix. I think it's an issue for TSM as well, but we didn't really talk about that, and we're done talking about TSM.
So, on the G2 issue, is it the case, like, when people say G2 would have gotten out of all the other groups, etc., right? You look at the teams that did get out, the other Western teams, obviously, you know, they weren't the strongest teams coming into the tournament, so it seems fairly obvious in that respect. But, like, it's always hard to weigh up, like, the moral victory you get when you play well but lose to the best team. So, how do you actually evaluate G2, like, it sounds like they still had some pretty big flaws at this tournament, right, Veteran?
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, so if you're asking me if they would be able to, so say we put them in place of any other European seed, or do they get out of their groups? Yeah, they comfortably get out of Group D, and they more than comfortably get out of, okay, that should definitely be the other way around. They more than comfortably get out of Group D, and they more than comfortably get out of Group B. That was the Longzhou Immortals group, right?
Yes.
Yes, for sure. I mean, they absolutely outclass Immortals in all those aspects. Them versus TSM would have been very interesting, since they are both essentially playing the same playstyle, except I think that G2 know far more about what to do when they have pressure in certain lanes. I mean, Trick was essentially like a solo ward bot in his debut split with G2. But so they don't, whereas when TSM gets mid pressure, they're literally just looking for wards. G2 actually knows to transfer the mid pressure to other parts of the map, and they're very good at that. But TSM are like a lower tier version of G2 in that sense, and both of them are low tier versions of SKT. But I still think it would have been really interesting to see that actually match up with each other and see what happens. But I think they win every.
Have we completed, Kelsey, the redemption of Perks?
I think Perks probably doesn't feel that way, but I think that it's hard to be overly critical of Perks for his career. Like, it's I almost debate, like, you're definitively calling G2 a better team, but I think TSM and G2 have similar problems in terms of just, like,
yeah, they do.
They fall behind, they still have issues getting back in because of how people set up lanes. Sometimes G2's idea of getting mid pressure is very, very one-dimensional. Like, we send jungler to this lane, even if it's not the best time for him to come to this lane. Like, even if it will screw up the wave in some sense for this lane. So I still think that there are some issues with G2 that are transient to TSM, like mid-lane and lane assignments, things of that nature. But at the same time, like, I do think that G2 have way better reactive play, I guess is the way to put it. Like, they react to situations way better.
Yeah.
I think, though, this is like almost like if TSM were in this group instead of TSM were kind of effectively in this group with where G2 was last year, right?
Yes.
And people saying TSM's praises to an extent. It's like if they were in any other group, they would get out. Obviously, not us. Like, we were having this Thorin's Christmas scenario, but it was just like, this is kind of, it feels like a redemption story for G2 from an outsider's perspective, but I feel like G2 as a team are probably still crushed by this to the same extent TSM are, you know?
Sure. Okay. In Group A, obviously you were quite low on EDG as it was, Kelsey.
Yes.
Like, there were some good moments, so what's the kind of final conclusion on EDG at Worlds?
They ended up in a situation where they could make, like, the kind of the LPL meta work for them with the really strong mid snowball. They got a really, really broken comp against C9 for diving bot, like setting up with the Galio Jarvan and Maokai. They are a good team at snowballing. They're a good team at understanding. They're a good team at understanding how to sideline their mid laner. But where they kind of screwed up was just like better vision control and river for SKT in week 1. Just iBoy going for this like kind of getting caught and then going for a subsequent outplay when SKT had like the better scaling comp. So I don't know.
I think Scout initially got caught, and then iBoy did his weird in hero play, and then later on, when SKT were full on sieging mid, then iBoy went hell out of position, just trying to pelt out damage. I have really no idea why. SKT literally had no way of finding an opening unless they were delivered it to them by EDG. To be honest,
like when we look at this group, okay, obviously EDG was like one game from a tiebreaker situation, and we saw already they had that first half of a game against SK Telecom in week 1 that was very, very good. Actually, they were in great position. So, do you slam them entirely? Like, should they have been a clear team to get out of the group? What do you think?
Oh, EDG.
Yes.
I mean, I thought Cloud9 were getting out of that group, and I think Kelsey agrees with that.
So then didn't EDG overperform to a degree then?
I think that EDG, I don't necessarily, I think almost like there are many teams that could do theoretically what EDG did to SKT and not win the game, just like he did. I think that there are a fair amount of teams that can do that. Like even AHQ could do that, and they actually won the game, and people were projecting the AHQ were like the worst team at the tournament, right? So, I think that Edward Gaming have a specific set of circumstances that work for them. They got those set of circumstances in the games they won. They got the set of circumstances in the games they almost won, and then, yeah, I mean that was about it for them. I don't expect them to be more. I think that you can have like similar to Perks. I think you can give like a Clear Love redemption story where Clear Love actually played like the world-class jungler at a world championship. He kind of gave up on like believing in his own hype to an extent and just played like a good fucking jungler for once. And that was that once his team to win, and like that showed. Obviously, they screwed themselves over with the first game loss to AHQ because they couldn't close out. But that's always like the EDG problem in general as well, I think.
Like, should EDG now follow RNG's approach of just going all Chinese? Like, if in some world, I realize you can't actually do this in LPL because of how the fucking politics work, but if in some world I could just transfer, like, Icon straight onto EDG, would that be a good move?
I mean, I think that, they're already sort of setting up for an eventuality where this occurs. Like, the reason why Aaron took a step back from the head coaching position to a more like administrative position is because he could work more with like the academy teams and raise like Chinese talent, which is where iBoy initially came from. And they ended up replacing Zet. Like Zet was almost like the wild turtle, except of Edward Gaming for spring, but they were never overt about it. It's just like, we're going to take this Zet guy from Coup Tigers and we're not going to explain that later on in the game, we've got like this 16-year-old who isn't quite good for the spot yet, isn't old enough, like things like this. They're just like, we're putting Zet here. I think that...
I just like the part where you're like, you've got this 16-year-old. We've actually got this 14-year-old and we're just busy Pritt sticking fucking hairs on him with and then we're going to pretend he's 16 and then look, oh, he's had a birthday, right? Yeah, he can come on LPL now. Like, yeah, anyway. Don't comment on that, but continue on. I realise you're not for Scurum, so it doesn't really matter either way, but keep going.
But, yeah, so that's kind of the setup there. I think that they're planning on building, like, more Chinese talent in the future. Right now, there was a lot of pressure on Scout this year. Like, I think most people acknowledge that there was a pressure on Scout to succeed to the point where, like, it felt almost like he had to make these ridiculously insane, almost like stupid, just straight up bad plays, like teleporting.
He did seem to be going super ham, right, for trying to make hero plays all game long.
This was in week 1, I think, especially, where he was, like, effectively ending a Lucian. So I think that was something that probably made it difficult for them in week 1. it felt like they had pulled some of that pressure back a little bit in week 2, or they had set up comps better for those scenarios. Like the LeBlanc comp was, I think, much better constructed than some of the Lucian comps. So, like they didn't do something like pick Lucian into Syndra. That was pretty fantastic. But they just played this out like much better, and it just seemed more cohesive and less scattered. So I would say that happened.
Okay. Right, veteran.
Up.
If you know, right, I never explained the premise of the title of the show, partly just because who gives a fuck? It's not really like some epic shit, is it? But the obvious premise, okay, without revealing too much, is basically like talk shows in general are just narratives, and are people just adding to narratives and people just making new narratives. So in general, I want to kill all narratives, and any narrative that comes must be like meticulously put on the surgeon's table and autopsied and taken apart, and you know, we're going to check every element of it, right? So here's the question, veteran. Cloud9, after they lost to Dignitas in the playoffs in NALCS, magically they were just shit. Magically, Jensen was never the MVP. Their entire team was pure trash. They should change half the players. They don't know what they're doing in the game. Now all of a sudden, they're amazing. They're the best NA team. Suddenly, you know, Sneaky's like a better player historically than Doublelift. You know, like all these ridiculous narratives that like you just can't win. It's like no matter what narrative gets killed, a worse narrative replaces it. It's like a zombie apocalypse of narratives. So where actually realistically is Cloud9? Because as we've just explained, EDG, basically the team that helped Cloud9 get in the playoffs, had a lot of issues. You know, so realistically, what's a fair assessment of Cloud9 so far?
I mean, Cloud9 was super lucky just to get to the top 8 as they are. EDG literally only had to beat HQ in week 1, and that was it, right? Then the SKT EDG game doesn't matter whatsoever.
Yeah.
I, again, think that Cloud9 are very uncoordinated. It's not just a bot lane issue. I think this also extends to top lane as well. I think that they just generally are very uncoordinated when it comes to the side of the map that their jungler is playing on. I think Cloud9 suffer from understanding the actual mechanics of tempo in mid to late game, but I think this is an endemic problem that a lot of NA teams specifically have. Like, this really, really screwed over Immortals week 2 Immortals was really heavily screwed over by this, and this is why I actually thought, and your tweets completely disagree with this, that GAM showed that they were a much better team than Immortals in their game, because they clearly understood this aspect of tempo that they didn't.
No, I definitely never said.
Cloud9
here's the thing, I never said anything about Immortals. What I said, veteran, is that GAM are not a good team. Do you understand the difference? Here's the difference. The things that GAM did were the only chance they had to win these games. Otherwise, guess what? Like every team that's actually good, they would have played the default meta style.
I mean, I kind of feel like instead of in week 2, they cut the bullshit a lot more. Like they cut the Western.
Yes. They didn't work out too well.
In week 2, they cut the bullshit a lot more. Like sure, they picked weird picks, but they were weird picks in the sense that other people aren't picking them. So you can almost like say that WE played weird picks in week 2 because other teams were playing them. But then they basically went for like good standard gameplay after going for.
And they lost most of the games.
But that's okay. Now we're into results-based analysis territory.
No.
The entirety of Immortals GAM, though, was played standard. It was played completely standard.
Immortals is not a good team. I don't know why you keep stressing that I think Immortals is a good team.
Side of the map. Huh?
I don't know where this straw man comes from that I think Immortals is a good team and that they're like the benchmark for if Gigabyte Marines is a good team.
No, but I think that Gigabyte Marines showed that they were a good team in the Immortals game. That's why I bring up the
Gigabyte Marines get out of any other group?
With the Gigabyte, I don't think the Gigabyte Marines, they wouldn't get out of. No, they wouldn't get out of any of those groups, probably.
They're not a good team,
I don't think that Immortals should get out of any of those groups either.
No,
not
the way that they were the only group they could get out of, probably.
Probably. But I also think that Fnatic lucked to get out of that group because Fnatic have a worse understanding of tempo and map play than GAM.
I don't know why anyone is hyping that group up. That's why I thought the group was a good chance for Western teams because one Western team's going to get out. You know, that's why it was
sure. But if I put GAM in to NA LCS or EU LCS, they would be competing at the same level that Fnatic and IMT was, and they could qualify for Worlds from both of those tournaments based on what they were doing. Yes, absolutely. They have a much better fundamental understanding of tempo, which is a gigantic issue when it comes to mid-late game, than most of the teams that they were up against, and most of the Western teams at that tournament.
They only won 2 games.
That's objectively true.
They won 2 games, and one of those games was with an approach which basically, like, it can only work or completely fail.
You mean the lane swap that they did in the Fnatic game?
It can only
lane
work.
Swap, that was actually a bad lane swap as well.
You have to completely catch them off, or you utterly lose the game. That's one of the only games they won.
Okay, do you think they utterly lost the Longzhu game? Right. Do you think they utterly lost the Longzhu game? Like either of them?
Why do you think?
Or the Fnatic tiebreaker.
Why do you think
did
that
they utterly lose the Fnatic tiebreaker?
Why did they do all these cheeses then?
Why did they do the cheeses?
Yeah,
okay, so the cheese versus Fnatic, I think that this guy just quite frankly has an obsession with cheesing in BO1 in the first week, and in the second week, what they did was not essentially cheese. What they did against Longzhu in the second week was actually essentially standard lanes, but in such a way that they were able to shut out Khan's pressure in the early game and then transition it into a really strong bot dive at the point at which Longzhu would otherwise be looking to use their bot lane security to start pressuring around the map. They were able to negate a lot of Longzhu's core game objectives in the early game with their strategy. It was a very innovative way that they did it. It was a very odd way that they did it. It was out of the left field way that they did it. Yes, sure. But it wasn't necessarily cheese per se. It showed an amount of intelligence, and the way that they played the game out after that was standard. It was standard. The way that they played the game out after they swapped Galio back to top was absolutely standard. They just actually understood these fundamentals. With IMT, it was just an ergot, but the entire game was just played standard. And you could just see that if you don't understand these fundamentals of control and tempo in mid to late game, you will lose to GAM. And so many Western teams don't understand this, that yes, I can comfortably say that GAM would be competing for a world spot in either NA or EU LCS. Drop them in. These guys are going to go to Worlds. If they don't completely and utterly fuck up, they're a good team. They showed it.
I would argue that in the Longzhu game, like, Longzhu shouldn't have made the initial dive play bot. I think that screwed them up a lot. Like, if they, it would have made more sense to either play a bit or to, like, try to counter, like, the pressure that Xayah had top lane before Xayah hit 6. So I do think that there was, like, a definite mistake in Longzhu's play, whereas, like, the bot lane wouldn't, the hybrid lane swap wouldn't have been as successful if Longzhu hadn't, like, screwed up that initial play. But I still think that, like, the pressure that they got against Khan and the subsequent dive that GAM eventually set up were, like, good ways of playing the Khan. The other thing about Gigabyte Marines, though, is that we do see that in the Fnatic game, there are definite limitations of some of the players, like, individually. Like, that is an issue that I think would play out more in a region over time. So I'm not going to say as definitively as you that this team would, like, consistently qualify for, that this team would, like, compete, like, 100% to qualify for LCS. But I think
Worlds.
Worlds. I said that they would be competing for Worlds.
I think they're going to come top 3 in one of the LCS.
EUNA. Yes.
But I think that but I agree that their fundamentals in macro were consistently better in the second week than either Fnatic or Immortals. So on the basis of, like, macro gameplay and understanding, they could still, like, easily compete for, like, top half, even if they aren't necessarily competing for world spots, based on the fact that their players are, like,
it also,
like, obviously Optimus can't play one of, like, the most broken champions in the game than Orianna, obviously.
So I also think that their game against Longzhu actually exposed a lot of issues, a lot of ways in which Longzhu lags behind SKT and Samsung when it comes to mid to late game control. When it came to both
Immortals had same, like, had a similar approach in the first week as well. So yeah,
sure, except Immortals were getting caught out versus Longzhu, and that's how Longzhu were able to get back into the game. So the same issue where SKT and Samsung have really good vision control to allow their scaling comps. When Longzhu aren't able to just snowball the game off of their solo lanes and then use that to bridge to their hyperscaler with Prey, like, when they're not able to do that, they actually don't have very good vision control when they now need to suddenly turtle. And they weren't actually able to pick out GAM in the same way that you would expect the game to be broken open versus SKT or Samsung Adair to do a comeback. GAM exposed that utterly. They weren't able to do shit to GAM until GAM were literally about to kill their fucking Nexus. Like, they just taken the fucking inhib and they were pouring into the base, and then GAM fucked up a team fight. Like, that's how Longzhu got back into the game there. They actually exposed a lot in Longzhu that I think Samsung are going to have to look at and be like, oh, this is actually an area we're strong and Longzhu don't fundamentally understand. So if we are fucking this up, what will we be terrified of?
Okay. As one last topic on the Cloud9 issue, what do you think of this argument that Sneaky is better than Doublelift because Sneaky has made better placings at Worlds? What do you think?
I think it's more that just like Doublelift has had more issues. See, the analogy that I would make isn't necessarily the Sneaky Doublelift analogy, but like the Bjergsen Jensen analogy, where it's like, okay, domestically this player is like performing really well, but this other player does really well at Worlds and consistently places higher. Oh my gosh, it's almost like one of them is a Chinese player named Clearlove, and one is a Chinese player named UZI, right? So I think it just like depends on what you're valuing super highly. Do we think that Sneaky is fundamental though to Cloud9's performances and Cloud9's ability to make a higher placing? I don't necessarily think he is. Like, I don't think Sneaky, like, I think Sneaky is to an extent something that they play around. Sneaky is doing fairly well in a hypercarry teamfight meta. Like, it's either him or Jensen to an extent making, like, hero plays when C9 screw up, like, some sort of objective play.
Yes.
But I think that, like, Sneaky is a cornerstone hard carry reason that Cloud9 are advancing later. That's where the UZI analogy kind of falls apart, you know?
Yes, that's the thing. Like, UZI is actually performing out of his mind in the current meta. The current meta really suits UZI. And at every international tournament, you can point to specific plays that UZI makes that allows his team to advance. But with Cloud9, they simply sacrifice a goat to the old ones, and they're able to get like the most breathtakingly easy group of their lives, where they just have to rely on SKT carrying them out in the exact same way each time.
As a playing team, no less.
Yes, as a
that's
playing
outrageous
team.
To get
but
that
it's almost the same group, and it ends the same way. SKT just like beats the random Asian team that are making a comeback at the end, and it's like it's utterly like so when you're saying that people are making this comparison, I'm like, wait, what? That makes no sense, because it wasn't Sneaky's performance at all that was like hard carrying them or anything like that.
This is a great example to me
of
of where, again, you don't need that much in-game analysis. This is just a narrative that's incredibly easy to kill. So it goes like this. Like, first of all, if you think Sneaky is better than Doublelift, to quote my man Chad Johnson, child please, because first of all, as they've kind of outlined here, Doublelift has been, if not the star player, one of the star players and focal points of every team he has ever played on in the eras you've all watched him play the game. So even making it to Worlds, you can even put that on Doublelift in many instances. Now, Sneaky has almost never been the best player on his team. In fact, sometimes he might have been like the third or fourth best player on his team at times. So their results can never be judged objectively against each other. You have to purely go on context, because it doesn't make sense to judge.
I mean, he was very consistent, though. I mean, you have to bear in mind that Sneaky was actually almost the entire focal point for Cloud9 back in Season 3. All of the engage heavy champs were put on Sneaky. All of the priority on this was put on Sneaky. Sneaky was the one that had to legit carry all these team players. Meteos was playing follow-up. And I was apparently micromanaging everybody and their
moms. So here's the scenario here, Veteran. If you're very, very consistent, and you always play very consistent, right, that's often because you get the most out of your performance. I would say Sneaky is an overachiever in his career. I think it's actually amazing what he's managed to do. The difference is Doublelift's ceiling is way higher, and Doublelift actually often reaches that ceiling more than even Sneaky's performance over their careers. And I don't really see what the relevance of the Worlds groups is anyway, because they're in completely different groups every time. I don't even really see how you can even contrast the international results in that sense.
No. I mean, go on.
I was just going to say that you can almost, in some metas, in some scenarios, compare the teamfight performances of Sneaky and Doublelift, but I think Sneaky has never been a laner on the level that Doublelift is.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think that's the big reasons why you're going to have... Yeah, but people are going to immediately say, that Sneaky is performing better in team fights than double lift, though, because the thing that's going to be seared into everybody's minds about this World Tournament when it comes to double lift is that he can't find his flash key in late game team fights. And that's all what's going to be seared into people's minds. So people will be debating this about Sneaky versus double lift. And all I can categorically say to you right now is that Sneaky was not the reason why Cloud9 got out of that group.
Also,
and his placing on the world stage has no bearing on the rating of Sneaky versus double lift.
Yes.
I do think Sneaky's underappreciated by you to some extent.
Why is he underappreciated by me?
Because you tried to characterize him as like a absolute overachiever when I thought that he was a very big part of why the most successful international team that North America ever had.
Do you know what the term overachiever means?
I mean, in your context, what does it mean then?
Well, no, don't tell me in my context. Just tell me what it means to you. What does the term overachiever mean?
A man who, I'm assuming in your context, has achieved more international placements.
No, do not tell me my context. Please tell me your context of the word, because by the way, you only understand your context. So just tell me your context of what the word overachiever means, please.
Well, the word overachiever means for me in this context is that Sneaky has placed far higher than he otherwise should by virtue of his teammates. At least this is what I'm getting from you.
No, definitely not. No, overachiever means that, like, if you looked at the person's base expectation for what they probably should do in their life and their career, he has, like, gone to the max of that and maybe even a little bit higher. Like, this is someone where if you threw him in any old team in the LCS in his career, which is one of the ways you have to think about athletes and professionals, he could have spent his whole career in teams that were like 5th to 6th, and he could have been a pretty good player, and he could have done totally all the same things, and it wouldn't change it. He wouldn't have made any LCS finals. He might have made a Worlds once in his career or something. He would never have been in position to make a quarters of a Worlds, and he doesn't have to change a single movement or button he presses in the game of League of Legends, because he's not a superstar AD carry. He's not some world-class star player and never has been. Now, that's a compliment when I say he's an overachiever. He has done all these things that he's done in his career because he essentially had to play almost to his max to accomplish all these things. And yeah, he had to have good fortune to be on certain teams with certain players. And yeah, every now and then to get a certain group that meant it was possible to get out. That's in no way a diss on him, though.
No, because Sneaky was one of the best performing solo queue AD carries in North America, if not the standout best performing solo queue AD carry in North America outside of Wild Turtle at the time that he was picked up. You absolutely expect this guy to dominate NA if he came into the scene. You absolutely expect
what does solo queue have to do with performance in your career in League of Legends?
Hey, if you expect North America to be competitive at that point, all right, then you expect Sneaky to be competing at the highest level of that.
Know that.
And if all the North American do is get to quarters, then Sneaky should be getting to quarters.
In his career, White Knight, NIP player, can get to #1 in Europe any day he wants.
Yeah, but White Knight was completely undefined in what role he did that in. Like,
exactly.
White Knight had 3 champions per role.
Sneaky
was an AD carry career.
Yeah, even better. He can do it with it. White Knight can do it with 3 champions. Sneaky does it with 1. With 1 role, rather.
But there are 3 bans in the game. There's a really obvious issue now.
It's not like he just changes his role based on the bans. I think that's a ludicrous, ridiculous conspiracy.
No, he couldn't actually find a role that he could legitimately come into for
here's
a long time. It was only recently that he actually finally fell into a role. Now he's not consistently getting bank all the time.
I'll just put a close on this topic by saying this one thing, okay? In no sense does a small sample size of like 3 times someone played at Worlds, right? Being better in that small sample size doesn't mean that somehow, this is the old Expeke line, doesn't mean you can go back to Europe and just chill out half the time, because no one's chilling out. They're all trying in all these games. Every game they play is all of them count. Even the games you play that are just against the bottom tier team in LCS, they all count. What we do for your career is we draw a line through all of them and see where you were. Not in results, in how you performed. So hence, as a result, listen, if you want to go only off results, you can start to make a case for Sneaky. If you want to just go off how they play the game of League of Legends, it's not even close between the two. One of them's a fucking legend, Hall of Fame player. The other one had some really good results and was part of some good teams. That's it. Case closed. Same with Bjergsen and when they contrast him against anyone. You got to look at how the other players played the rest of their lives. Like, it doesn't make any sense to say, all he can do is dominate NA. So you mean where all the players you contrasted him are from? Brilliant. Sounds like he's amazing.
Would you call Sneaky the second best North American AD carry of all time? I'm just talking about, like...
There aren't really many from NA, are they? It's a fucking dumpster region for AD carries. I've always said that.
Yeah, sure, but I just, like, if you had to come up with the second best
reasonable.
NA AD carry of all time.
I think it's pretty reasonable to call him second. First of all, almost no one has any longevity in NA, so it's tough. I mean, Wild Turtle's actually a contender, I'd say, for that.
Wild Turtle's a contender for second?
Yeah, why not?
No.
I think in a hyper carry meta, for sure, Sneaky outpaces Wild Turtle.
Yeah. There's legit zero doubt in my head. You cannot rely on Wild Turtle at all in this type of meta.
Like, I think Sneaky's positioning in team fights is way more reliable in terms of like the amount of damage that he's able to do, like the amount of autos he gets off, like how he's able to dodge skill shots is a lot more reliable than Wild Turtles. So I would say that like I would give it to Sneaky before Wild Turtle for sure.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, also by same virtue, because I brought up the solo queue thing to set like expectations versus reality of when he was being picked up. At the same time, Wild Turtle is a gigantic underperformer versus expectations, particularly if you take into account all of the teams that he's been on. He's a gigantic underperformer.
By the way, let's just go ahead and throw that in. So if Sneaky's an overperformer in this sense, by the way, in the same context, I'd also say I was an overperformer in his career. But if you go and then put the same context in, we should mention that actually Wild Turtle and Doublelift are underperformers in this sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
you should expect more from them.
And I agree, Doublelift and Wild Turtle are underperformers. But I think that Sneaky's just performed at like the level that you would expect, and that it's not necessarily like that doesn't mean that Sneaky should be like some sort of super strong world-class player to have achieved top 8 twice at Worlds.
Sure.
Three times at Worlds.
I mean, he is obviously an
but he's performing. He's performing at the apex of NA AD carry, which is about what you would expect from him.
Yes,
that just doesn't happen to be that high. So I don't think he's overperforming. I don't think he's underperforming. I think Doublelift and Wild Turtle have definitely underperformed in their careers.
Okay. What about?
I think that.
Come on.
Thing about the Cloud9 environment though that was like really unique in a sense was that it was full of players that were like found ways to play off of each other and to strive for like more than was currently already being achieved in the region. Sure. And so in a sense, in that definition, almost every Cloud9 player in like the Season 3 era was an overachiever.
Yeah,
like by the definition of overachiever, you're just like constantly hitting as high as you can and you don't have to. Right? So I think that like by that definition, like all of those Cloud9 players were overachievers.
Like I'll make one final point. Here's a difference between the two players. You can, as we've actually seen in their careers, you can put Doublelift into almost any type of team with any level of players, and whatever the results are, he will perform fairly similarly because he's a star player. The difference is Sneaky's, first of all, being part of some very good teams, and then secondly, I actually think if you put him on some of these bad teams, you'd just never hear from him again, mate. He might do perfectly fine, but you would never hear from him. He'd be like a better version of Alltech.
I kind of feel that that's a cop-out because we've done this with Piglet.
What do you mean?
I'm never seeing Piglet on the international stage ever again. He went from world champion to that shit. So, like, you can do this with a lot of players. Like, how many players do SKT have to drop that go completely into irrelevancy and out of relegation in their first play outside of SKT?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I've always thought everyone blew up the SKT players way too much and continue. Like, I don't know why. For some reason, the day after Season 3 ended, like, so the day, well, I guess it was slightly after. Okay, you know when SKT won that OGN championship 15-0. The day after that, everyone in the whole world, Deficio, Jat, people at Riot, everyone even in Korea, all the analysts all woke up and you all went, oh, right, time to spend the next 5 years of my life downplaying Faker as much as I can. And you all did a fucking fantastic job. The narratives you created were unreal. Marin was the best player in the world. Duke was a shitter. Like, just all over the place. Just the most amazing, I think, completely disingenuous narratives of all time. Meanwhile, here we are, Season 7, 4 seasons later, and who is looking at the moment like the best mid laner in the tournament? Who easily got his team out of groups, sometimes without even having vaguely flashy games? No one could ever do anything to this guy. Oh, it's still the same player 4 years later. What a weird coincidence that is. Must just be luck.
Well, B Diddy has a lot of history that I don't really know about, apparently.
Who knows? Who gives a fuck, right?
It's just amazing to me, though, that, like, it was less than about 3 or 4 months ago, right, where we had the MSI SKT performance where literally every player on that team was the best player in their role, right? And now we're here.
I mean, that was just the ultimate. That was obviously that tournament was the reckoning for that narrative that everyone always did with SKT, wasn't it? Because like the idea they thought that like Huni was going to stay as the best top laner, well, like shut the fuck up, everyone, come on.
I mean, the weird thing is that like it happens with every roster, though, right?
Yes,
it happens with every single SKT roster. They do this again and again and again, and no one everyone just has really, really bad memories or something. Like this is the same thing.
What's funny is it's in its own way on obviously reverse results, but it's the same context as what we're talking about with the Bjergsen narrative. What happens is every single year, even though Bjergsen bombs at Worlds, their brains get the Men in Black guys come in and do the reset, and then everyone looks at him in NLCS and goes, "Fucking hell, this guy's world class. He could maybe be top 3 mid laner in the world." And then what happens is the SKT version is because they win Worlds and because they do super clutch through playoffs, even when they do badly in splits, everyone goes, "They were always the best." And then when the players leave, they go, well, luckily no one watches LPL, so half the time they never have to experience cognitive dissonance. But if they do watch it, they go, it's weird. Why is he just inting in the top lane there? Well, can't be anything to do with any of that shit I said in SK Telecom. Forget all that conveniently. There's only been one god that ever played in SK Telecom. That's why I had it totally on point, Veteran, 3 years ago when I made that top 20 article. And I just had a line that began the article. And this just defines the whole thing. I just said, before Faker, League of Legends was like a pantheon. It was like, there was a bunch of gods. There was the best AD carry, and there was the best jungler, and there was an amazing carry top laner. And what you could do is you could debate all day, depending on what your preferences are, who the best player was. And then along came Faker, and it's been monotheism ever since then, mate.
Monotheism.
Now, he might not have always been at his best, but he always was the god.
No one has consistently stayed towards the top of their role ever in the history of League of Legends. And this is a short history of League of Legends, admittedly, so not too many of these players are able to come out as Faker. Like that, he's literally alone in that. He's literally alone. Like B Diddy can have a fantastic performance in this tournament, and he can have his name thrown up there with Faker. But if you were a betting man, you would absolutely bet that Faker's name would still be mentioned up there 3 years hence from now,
essentially,
over B Diddy.
Like I'm not saying these players are bad players. Like for example, Duke, Marin, these are very good players. Actually, they're just, here's the problem: the narrative always had an implication that Faker is allowed to stay at the top because he keeps getting reloaded with all this best talent. I feel like it's like more the other way around. More like you put good talent around the best player ever, and that's why you keep winning all the titles and all the championships. It's the other way around.
He's also a mid laner. Like SKT by default played around mid lane, which is literally the lane that the entire map pivots. I mean,
around. I don't think it's a coincidence, Veteran. Like I said in that video I made like a year ago, there's no coincidence that when we have these discussions, the only players in the discussion is like Bjergsen or fucking Faker. There's no top laners here. There's no fucking AD carries because the game drastically shifts so much, and obviously the role has more of an impact on the map, right?
Yeah, but there's especially also this complaint that like when SKT are having their slumps, that Faker's not on too many playmaking champions or whatever, but SKT can only opt for these types of control styles because they have Faker in the early game and because they're able to apply so much pressure to Faker's lanes and sacrifice so much in other areas, and yet Faker will know what to do with that. I mean, let's keep them in the game for as long as possible.
Let's actually transition this to a talk about the actual tournament because we got a bit abstract.
Yeah, so I was trying to get that.
Let me ask you this then, Veteran. So in this tournament, one detail about Faker that was interesting was it did seem like every team was like, we'll just non-stop gank mid, we'll non-stop camp mid, we'll non-stop mid, and it never mattered, right?
Sure. What you mean ganking Faker's lane in Group A? Or do you just
I thought every team was focused on it in Group A.
No, I mean SK2 were playing comps where they knew that they would have to give up ground anyway regardless. And also I still think that SKT are maintaining vision control properly around mid lane as they should in the early game, to the point where they've essentially bastardized Peanut's playstyle to achieve this and make him like Bengi light, I guess you could say. So SKT are simply adapting to give Faker as much safety as possible. That being said, I'm trying to remember particularly. It was the HQ game, wasn't it? It was the HQ game where Faker, still with all of this vision control mid, outright saw Mountain coming and still got popped there. So it does work sometimes. It worked in the HQ game, and the victory of the mid jungle in the HQ game is absolutely what propelled it forward. If you can break SKT's mid lane, it is proven that the game is over and this is done. All right, we've proven it in this tournament. With this incarnation of SKT, it seems to be an especially vulnerable point. You win mid jungle, you win the game. Right? If any other player other than Faker was on that team, you'd see a lot more losses on the SKT side for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
keep going. Always keep going.
You already highlighted it, but the thing about SKT is that, like, the pressure that Faker can have with, he's like, this is where I think the fundamental misunderstanding of, like, mid pressure or mid jungle control breaks down for a lot of, like, either fans, sometimes even Western teams. Sometimes it's just like, if you gank mid jungle and your mid laner is ahead, you have mid jungle control, which is just wrong. Because, like, if you send the entire team mid repeatedly and Faker is still, like, able to stay competitive and, like, catch waves, and, like, they're still able to keep vision cleared around the lane, then you haven't broken open mid jungle. This is why I saw an interview with Bjergsen where he said, I think ganking mid against SKT is useless. It's like, if your theory is that Faker just stays in lane because you aren't really understanding, like, how to break open the mid jungle control by, like, taking vision advantages off of the pressure that you get against Faker in this moment in which, like, he's forced back, then it's useless. Congrats.
I mean, Mountain was maintaining deep vision off of it, in fairness. Like, they did actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, the fact that AHQ actually got deep vision off of it, the fact that, like, EDG, like, Scout, Clearlove actually got deep vision off of, like, ganking Faker in the first game was actually really impactful. Like, it is the focal point of the map. It is where the map, like, all the pressure for SKT radiates outward. You do have to break open mid jungle to be SKT. It isn't useless. This is how you have to do it.
And isn't it in
PoE
theory more
with
possible?
the Nashes too?
Yes. Isn't it in theory more possible now, though, in a world where there is no Bangi?
I mean, Blank is more than a good enough substitute for it, and I think that Peanut is being trained to perform the same function, and I also think that it's not just the role of the jungler to keep mid lane alive in SKT. Like, they sacrifice a lot in both side lanes to achieve control of mid. It's not purely a mid jungle thing, but if you are able to break open the mid jungle, then that is your opening to beat SKT. But they have backups in mind.
Okay.
I would say that the distinction between Blank and Bengi, Peanut is weird to me because Peanut is super inconsistent in a lot of ways. But the big distinction between Blank and Bengi for me is that Bengi understands better how to get lanes back into the game when they fall behind, like how to help lanes with backs or how to set up, like, situations or apply pressure when lanes are struggling. Whereas I think Blank is much better at just, like, using pressure that the lane is already generating to increase advantages. Like, Blank is much better at that. Like, I even straight up asked him or interviewed him about this, and he was, like, pretty upfront. It's like, if a lane is losing, I'll probably just, like, ward it and go somewhere else. Like, I think that that's a big distinction between the Bengi style and the Blank style.
So the last topic we need to discuss is the Longju Samsung matchup. Now, you touched on it before, Veteran, like some flaws you saw from Longju where potentially, like, they weren't very good at turtling, where you saw perhaps Samsung can benefit in this way. Right? Obviously, Samsung didn't really have a great group stage overall. How do you see the matchup coming in?
I mean, if you want to beat Longju, you have to target what GAN targeted, and that is their Geo lane, because their Geo. Okay, so they even said in that LCK finals, like, trash talk thing, that they think that they're, like, elevating the rest of their team, and this is really true. Longju are able to, like, rely on the Geo lane to maintain mid pressure as strongly as possible in mid to late game, and allow the side lanes to play out properly. If you can target the bot lane and weaken it significantly in the early game, they're not able to do that anymore. And that's when you can start abusing the types of things that I was mentioning were exposed in, like, the GAM thing. But you have to have a plan to do that at first. And Samsung do have a history of being able to adapt for this. They did it against, was it G2? Yeah. I think it was G2. Huh?
Yeah, it was G2.
Yeah, it was
the way that they
against G2. Yes, it was Kha'Zix versus Zach. Yeah. They actually kept, like, full control of bot side for, like, the entirety of, like, the first 8 minutes of that game, right? And it was really, really simple for them to just pelt down the tower down and try to accelerate the game on their own pace. And I think that would be, like, the key to trying to beat Longzhu would actually be to play around bot and to actually shut that down before they're able to become the bedrock that the side lanes need. Because when they're not able to be the bedrock, Khan's shown that he will overextend. Gam were able to punish that really significantly. They're shown that they are not able to maintain vision control as well as SKT and Samsung are able to do. And I think that if you're able to knock out the bot lane, then you have a bunch of openings that Samsung are more than capable of abusing. However, I don't think that Samsung will actually be able to take out their bot lane. I just don't think that Will is good enough. I don't think that any plan that they're gonna come up with for this game is going to be capable of significantly taking games off of Longzhu. And I think it's going to be like a 3-1 at most, at best, for Longzhu.
I mean, the way Samsung were able to do this in the Samsung G2 game, right, was G2, we already talked a little bit about, like, in that game, they drafted basically a zero pressure side lane, or a zero pressure.
It was Maokai top versus China.
And then even with that, Samsung basically invest all of the resources they have into getting control of this, like, because Samsung were on blue side, into getting control of red side blue buff area jungle, right? So they invest like everything they have into getting control of this, and then what they're able to do with this is they force the enemy bot lane off the turret so that Samsung's bot lane can get chip damage, and this is like their way of getting control of bot lane, and this is effective, right? This is effective, but it's a more like kill you slowly sort of effectiveness that I don't necessarily think is going to be like what shuts down Longzhu. And also Longzhu will prioritize like having much stronger lanes in general than G2. G2 saw the game as like you scale up and you team fight at 40 minutes. Like flat out, they see the game this way. And I don't think Longzhu see it that way. So I don't think it will be as easy for them to draft a comp that lets them get this kind of like pressure that they were able to get against G2.
Sure. So then I guess a lot of it's going to come down to the matchups on top side, because you're not going to be able to play on bot side the way that Samsung going to need to if your top lane tank is currently being smashed by Jarvan or some shit from Khan or Jace, which is what everybody is expecting him to bring out at every point that he can. And I do agree that Samsung are going to need to find a more aggressive, like they're going to have to start looking for dive spots. It's not just about taking chip damage and gaining a huge tempo advantage. Like you do have to eliminate bot from the game, significantly weaken it. You have to have a better response to it in the 1-3-1. And I this is why when I take all these factors into account, I still think that Samsung are just kind of a foregone conclusion to lose here. I think Samsung know this themselves. But
okay. But at the same time, I still think Samsung have the advantages, especially when they play Ambition, of like really being able to reinforce mid well. Like Samsung kind of do the opposite, like also try to sacrifice a lot for mid control. Like if QV has priority, he will invest it into like wards that are closer to mid lane in the jungle. He will invest it into like relieving pressure from the jungle that the jungle could convert to the enemy mid lane. So I think that they're good at keeping this kind of control, and this is what we sort of saw fall apart when Haru was playing, is that they had less of a focus to mid, and what they can do with that is that they can either use the pressure that they get from the mid to set up good wards like behind the Baron and have this like and keep the wave bouncing like on top side so that they have like really consistent Baron pressure. And I don't think that Longzhu are as good at that. So this is part of why Longzhu and Samsung had like a fairly close record. So there's still like mid to late game holes and windows that Samsung could theoretically exploit. I just think that right now Crown is playing really inconsistently, and then they would have to invest a lot to make sure that Crown has that sort of setup.
I also think that even if they do invest a lot mid, though, I don't think BDD is the type of player that is going to allow you to take significant advantages off of that. Like, I don't think you're going to be shutting down what you should be looking to shut down versus Longzhu if you play with that in mind. I'd be really interested to see how they would have done like in a best of 5 in like the playoffs or something, but we never actually got to see that. I don't think that's a good way of attacking Longzhu at all.
I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.